Okay, so we'll do a quick introduction. So who is the master teacher? So if you've not come across us before, as I say, we are the United Sabians Worldwide. The founder of our organization is Dr. Malachi Z York Okran, born in Ghana, Takoradi, June 26, 1945, and was born to a sacred feminine by the name of Mary Abba Akran York. You can see here on the left, also known as Fatima, who was born March 10th, 1929. It's important, as I say, as we start to realign with natural nature to ensure that nature goes through the female first, or the sacred feminine first. That's the structure. That's how the rules of nature work. And so therefore, in that regard, what we are seeing here is when we are expressing our culture, we're aligning ourselves with nature, or Panatharu. So Panatharu is the name for our higher ancestors. It means the overseers. Your blood relatives are referred to, who have passed, I should say, are referred to as our Salafu. So that's ancestors, as it translates to all of us within Fa'ut, existence, or the all expanding. And as I say, but as nature's rules work, energy, matter, etc., all starts with that feminine energy first. So how our systems were matriarchal, or are matriarchal, I should say. And Mary Abba Akran York, we give her that acknowledgement, because without her, you wouldn't have the master teacher as seen today. So as you can see here, this is her in her clan mother attire, and the clan, and she has transitioned now. So it's part of our Salafu, or ancestors now, guiding us and assisting us as we call upon them to help us in this day and time to navigate through the physical life, transitioning to higher realms of existence to seek perfection as and when that physical life expires. Understood? So that's part of their role in service to us, as well as their own individual ascension journey. Yes, that's Mary Abba Akran York, and her daughter is the clan mother in this day and time, Mutpataret, or Kamamtat Mutpataret Atum Raye, which is her daughter. So again, you see the mitochondrial link to Mary Abba Akran York being expressed in our culture. So his father is Al-Hadi Abdur Rahman Al-Mahdi, again, born 1922, part of the royal family of Sudan. You see the patrilineal lineage there, linking back to Sayyid Muhammad al-Mahdi, Ahmad al-Mahdi of the Sudan. As I say, we've done a lot on him in the previous part, so look him up. We may have to do this class, Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn the guidance. I don't think we've taught that before. Something to go into just on that whole Islamic lineage or degree, and then how it ties back into ancient Egypt, as say Sudan, tying back into pre-dynastic ancient Egypt, and how all of that is connected together. Yeah. So again, royal lineage there, really very powerful, very well-renowned family. Let's say al-Mahdi himself, the name is known, but the individual certainly is not really acknowledged properly by the Islamic world today, because unfortunately his freckles were too close. Well, unfortunately for them anyway, because of their internal racism. Now, this is the master teacher at age 25, where it explains that he was in-house or initiated. So the way in our culture, how our story gets renewed is by various different masters incarnating or coming back to raise us in terms of our own ascension journey, one may describe it as, or to set the record straight. So many times we may become unaligned, misaligned, however you want to describe it, with nature's rules, etc., and have veered away from our true purpose. And so teachers are sent and incarnated, understood, to raise us back and move us back to that position. So at age 25, the physical vessel was housed by a being known as El Khadir. Now, in ancient Egypt, they referred to this role as Amenhotep Reye Akhta, understood. In fact, the ancient Egyptians referred to that individual as Thahutwi, and the TWY at the end denotes a duality or dual there. So we can see that Tahuti, or they call Tahuti or Thahutwi, as he was known through the various different ages and how he was depicted, is a double being. In fact, the Greeks referred to him as Thoth, 3 times great. So when they saw him, they associated with 3, but the Twi denotes dual. So here we're talking about a vehicle or a vessel where you've got a physical vessel where the genes, the lineage, etc., throughout the ages, we sought to protect that lineage to allow our ancestors to use that bloodline, so to speak, to incarnate into. So in the first part of the medicine that was needed in the form of outformation coming to us in the form of information, that combination to take us through the religious degrees, or the first half an hour symbolically from 1970 down to 2000, but in fact, this combination extended to around 1996 with the release of a book called The Holy Tablets, which we've expressed in the previous parts, was a bridge between religion and reality in our journey. So housed by the combination of El Khadir, so Isa al-Hadi al-Mahdi, and El Khadir, many names and title changes between that. Because when they first brought Wu-Sabat, which is the spiritual culture of the Negroid or Nagar Nadu, it was too heavy for us, understood? So we didn't understand it. We wanted to worship, we wanted religion, etc. We didn't really want to stand on our own 2 feet in that regard. The Mokasu or the Caucasian have done a good job on getting us into the kind of spook belief of what God is, the Most High, Heavenly Father, so on and so forth, various different terminologies, be it Christianity, Islam, and Judaism in particular, as the most popular of those religions on the planet. So the medicine that was needed was to have to address that. And so basically that combination that did that was Isa al-Hadi al-Mahdi and El Khadir. And then when we were ready now to move into our doctrine and our teaching, preparing us now to learn about who we are and really learn about our culture, as the poison had been addressed, then that combination was Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn as the incarnated being and the physical being, Dr. Malachi Z could be in New York, Okran. And this is Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, who the Egyptians referred to as the Natharu, obviously where they get the English word nature from, but the proper title actually is Murazaku, or Riskiyan's word Murazaku, actually one who provides or providers in that regard. So that's who they was being referred to as, who say they are responsible for not only the creation of this universe some 24 million years ago, but also responsible for our creation, and so as guardians of how existence evolves, grows, etc. So I'm not going to spend too long doing the introduction because we've got several things we need to cover today. So we've got parts 1, 2, and 3 on the YouTube channel. So please check those out, or if there's any questions people have got, then feel free to ask them. So this just shows a combination in a long line of teachers. And this is some of the challenge in this day and time you see on the screen. Don't make me holy so you can find holes in me. So this thing where basically people being put into positions of responsibility or power, not to say that all of us have a responsibility to maintain our culture. All of us have the responsibility to uphold the morals, the caliber, the standards, etc. So as a race, our expression of those certain principles will always be the highest standard of living because of our melanin dominance. Our vibrational rate can raise higher than all other races. We were there from the very beginning or origin of things. So we have the ability to express ourselves in the highest fashion, form, etc. when it comes to those principles. However, what happens or tends to happen in this society is that the holy tag tends to be used as an excuse to bring people down in various different positions. So not to say that we shouldn't judge each other, but basically we're multiple personalities. It's one race within us, understood, so as a people. And so just because somebody's in the seat doesn't mean, for example, in any seat of power, it's not to look at them and separate themselves from you. You should see them as you and you as them. So help that person, if they're in that seat, to become successful in their leadership, not point the finger and say, oh, you're not doing this properly, you're not doing that properly. As a tribe, our responsibility is to make sure that they're successful in their job, whatever that seat of appointment is, understood. And so understand that all of us are from that same source, but many of us may be appointed to different things or roles, etc. And everybody has to play their position, understood, as a tribe in order for it to be successful. So they want to make it very easy, as we see now. Unfortunately, a lot of trial by media type of scenarios that are going on within our society, which as Nagarnadu Negroids is kind of disappointing to see that, because it shows that we haven't grown or elevated really. Because if you think about it, the justice system around the world, I mean, obviously we're in the UK, we've got people from all over the world on this call, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, the justice system has been the just us system. So it's favored them more than it has ourselves. So basic principles like innocent until proven guilty have to stand regardless of whether we like a crime, not that anybody likes a crime, but some crimes are more horrendous than other crimes. But the principle, when you have a principle, it means it doesn't change. And so it doesn't change in the face of emotion, you understand? So when you see us acting in a way that's lower than even, innocent until proven guilty, even though the system's already against us, why would you want to lower it to trial by media? You understand? So that's not saying that the media doesn't have a role to play in uncovering certain madness that might be going on, but it's certainly not a place for trial and judgment, you understand? And so you see a lot of reckless talk oftentimes where, if the person's guilty, then maybe your words are absolutely correct. But if the person's innocent, yes, what opportunity have they had for innocent until proven guilty if you're going to be out there tainting the potential jury pool to be able to look on this case if you're throwing in your own opinion on the matter just because you don't like the crime or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of hypocrisy out there. And as we started in part one of this class, be careful of the influence of fake stars. Understand? Be careful of that influence because it's becoming more prominent because of social media and other tools where people are not, living by actual facts, parterac, sound right reasoning. You understand? They say they are, but are they really discerning fact from myth? Are they really discerning, facts from lies, so on and so forth, and really going in and interrogating and not using their power to share something if it's not factual? You understand? So this is how we need to start to move. Now, Wu-Sabat is the science of the Nagarnadu or Negroid, and it starts mentally first. So it's designed to fix or correct or brainwash, understood, but not in the brainwashing way it's trick, but we've been brain dirtied by bad information, poor translations from their fake scriptures and so on and so forth. So that has dirtied the way in which our perception of the universe and actual facts actually works. And so we need our brains cleansed, understood, from all of that filth and rubbish and lies, etc. And so the science that unifies us as different races have their own unifying spiritual doctrine that unifies them is Wu-Sabat. And Wu-Sabat in this day and time, the new spirituality is factual information for us. So once we're able to unify mentally, then the physical unity can follow. So we may be touching on racial subjects in this class. So I'll just move on quickly. No one wins a race in racism. So we're about race unity not race hate, a famous saying from Dr. Malachi Z, York, Okran. But at the same time, many subjects that we have to deal with are uncomfortable, and so therefore it can become challenging in that regard to speak about certain issues that we need to have, adult conversations about. When I say adult, I mean adult in terms of the human race, because when you start to point out some of the differences between us, then unfortunately this seems to lead to, us being called fancy names like black supremacist and, all the other titles that they've got for you, where you're trying to point out some of the inequalities between the races. And it's difficult also in this society to have conversations about us because so many have taken the opportunity to hide, the real origin of certain times where they got their knowledge or advancements and things of that nature, and do not want to give credit to those who look closer to what the existence looks like. Space, we look up outside, it's not a place full of necessarily bright lights. It's a dark environment, understood? So we came from a dark place. Light exists within darkness. Light is not darkness, or superior to it by any means in the same existence. We know that dark matter, dark energy, that combination makes up 90% of existence, whereas light, so-called light sources, which is energy moving through darkness at particular speeds, only makes up 10%. So the visible universe makes up 10% of existence. So predominantly this is darkness, but the world does not respect that blackness, and it doesn't respect nature. Understood? And this is why we find ourselves with all the challenges today, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, which has affected how they've lived or how we've done things, is now affecting the rest of the world in the form of climate change, understood, or how it's been classified as climate change. So real issues facing the planet right now, and the planet requires healing, but it will take action to heal itself against the behavior of man as mankind. And obviously, if we find ourselves following them and their ways, then we're going to get caught up in that. And so the solution for us is to do for self in that regard, and that is Wu-Sabat, you understand, about our own stuff. Okay, so let's move to where we're going to be speaking about today. Any questions so far?
No questions so far.
Okay. Okay, right. So this is where we need to be. So we're going to focus on what's being called the Tulli Papyrus. We have we're between the two books, so Lost Records of Time and Tulli Papyrus, between those two scrolls. So if you want to know more information, find out from your local All Eyes on Egypt store, or go to one of those websites and order the book directly from them in your local area. Support your local store if you're able to keep this information being put out there and going. So we throw up this image, and later on, either this year or next year, we'll be doing a class on this particular Master Secret. The Master Secret is what TMS stands for. Number 9, and it's called the Mother Circle of Existence. Excuse me. So you see the Patar symbol there, your third eye, associated with the pineal gland. I think we've covered that in a couple of the earlier classes, maybe part 1 or 2 of this class. So it's important, as we keep sort of saying part 1, 2, today part 3 and part 4, about seeing things from our perspective, because obviously those lost records, which we expressed to you, lost records of time, those lost records, ultimately, yes, it's the way in which how the records got lost is because other cultures' perception of looking at our culture, obviously, instead of asking us, because a lot of the time, many of the things that you're looking at have been stolen. So therefore, they couldn't ask us They couldn't ask us. So, maybe I couldn't ask or didn't want to ask us because they wanted to make it look like the knowledge or information came from them. And so in doing so, you lost something, isn't it? Because they're looking at certain things, could be symbolism, could be the way something's worded. And if they were not of, for, and even birthed from that culture, they would have a lack of understanding. Hence why you see our system works in a way where basically, we have ancestors coming back in order to teach us, or that connection to that whole pool of knowledge of all those who have come before us is then channeled, etherically through an individual or point person for us to have an example to live up to, ask questions, find out, etc. As long as that physical body is here, once it expires, then obviously that has to be done via a different way. And we've had many different teachers along the way of different types trying to convey information to us. And a lot of time, let's be honest, as a people, certainly in more modern times, we have bucked against it. Yeah, we're always bucking against, teachers, authority, things of that nature. And at a certain point, you have to understand from our perspective, you were from the 1970, you were being, and the new souls that came through as well in that particular era, known as the hip hop generation, we were conditioned in that sense to rebel. It was necessary, but that rebelliousness was to go against the so-called status quo of that time. You understand? In order to break out of the spell that we were under, we needed that rebellion. But that doesn't mean to rebel against everything. So in the face of your own culture, in the face of your own rules, in the face of your own way of doing things, you then have to have some level of conform, but not conform as in contra-form to go against form, but conform to go with a form. Understood? Meaning to say that we've taken information in to change the way in which our body and obviously ultimately our mind is perceiving the world around us. So we have to learn to work together in that regard. Do you understand? So eventually, you should understand why we have rules, the reasons why we follow them. You understand why? Obviously, if you might put incentives or disincentives in the system for certain types of adverse behavior that's going to break the peace and the unity amongst us. So you're seeing it from, okay, I understand why are these rules in place. There's not just somebody saying, do not lie, or thou shalt not kill, or thou shouldn't do this. And then when someone asks you, well, why? You understand? Or they're pointing out, well, that character lied. These individuals killed. You understand? And nobody understands why, because the context is not there. The cultural context is not there. And actually, it's just a bunch of stories which have been unproven, are not proven, and they have a lack of detail. Yeah, so that's the reality of it. People are sitting there interpreting it, saying they get the spirit and all this type of stuff. But you only need to do that because of the lack of detail in the book. And when you go back and see who the authors are, or so-called translators into the authors, it's nothing but the imagination of artisans. And I've said many times in these classes, when art masquerades itself as actual facts, it's a problem for human existence. So it proves itself to be a problem. Yeah, artisans created a white Jesus. It's a problem. Artisans created this image of Adam, so-called touching God. It becomes a problem. Yeah, it leads to their God is responsible in Genesis chapter 3 for the various different racisms and isms that we have in this society today. But, egotistical male artists are responsible for a lot of problems that we have today. You understand? It's not got any better because now we've got more efficient mediums that are able to convey that information. And if it's not based on some kind of factual, it can't be based on facts because ultimately the medium has to remove a lot of detailed information because of time. Understood, yeah? But you think about television, social media, it's the time that's being for it to express itself is getting more and more, it's getting shorter, isn't it? It's not getting longer. It's getting shorter in terms of form. It's getting shorter in terms of people's concentration levels. So it's leading to bad perceptions of situations, incidents, and certainly the world around us. So when we look at, so we need to bring all of our eyes together. So our two physical eyes and our mind's eye needs to be opened up, which, as I say, actual facts, Pater and these master secrets are doing exactly that. So 4 in 1, we're going to touch upon that a bit today. So 4 in 1. So obviously, you know, we say we're numerologists, we're interested in the science of numbers. Factologists, interested in factual information. And then ontologists, we're interested in the origin or the root of things. Now, first will be last and last will be first to go. So you're definitely living in that day and time where nature is certainly making that real. You understand, in terms of last will be first to go, in terms of taking out certain groups. People, we find ourselves, because we have, in fact, a Pater parts 1 and 2, I was there, which was here. Parts 1 and 2, and Master Secrets number 1, Birth of the Matrix, that particular scroll. Our ancestors point out, in terms of where we should be in our development, as you're aware, they say you're not in this condition for what you have done, but for rather what you have failed to do. So if people find themselves, we find ourselves in now, having to take vaccines and various different things, that's because of what we failed to do, or allow to happen to us in that regard. So we're not as advanced where we should be. We've maybe put too much energy into disagreements between us instead of fighting for the unity that we have to express, the love and unity that we have to express in order to overcome the enemies that are fighting against us. Racism still exists today. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. Obviously, things are changing, but what are you waiting for? You're waiting for the Caucasoid to change in nature, and then things we perceive will be better. And even now, if you look at some of our behavior, we're becoming them more and more every day, getting their diseases, behaving like them. Even today, we're expressing a lot of their hypocrisies. So there has to be a clear separation of us setting the standards for the world in terms of how all human beings should be, and expressing the will and the love of Panatharu, and being the best of examples in that regard. But in order to do that, we need to overcome certain obstacles. And as we see, I think they say, isn't it, in their idioms, time waits for no man. So we know that time is, and events are going to continue whether you want them to or not. Understood? Yeah. So nature's timeline and its decisions, and the planet's decisions, and the solar system's decisions, and the universe's decisions, and the black hole at the center of the universe, these things are going to carry on irrespective of whether human beings acknowledge their existence or not. And the fact of the matter is that, if you're looking at the wrong watch, so to speak, or if you're watching the wrong clock, you're gonna get things wrong. So we know that clock is up there in the skies that we need to be paying attention to for the day and time we're in. So, the master teacher, Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, has always kept us, or sought to keep us, 10 years ahead of events which are happening in this day and time. So, it's up to individuals, you understand? I think he's proven himself, but you wouldn't know that, unless you really put the books, etc., to the test, proving himself really to show a love of his race and those who are definitely prepared to listen and respect the culture, to how to navigate and move in this day and time. So we still fight for his freedom, because you know that the progression of our race, certainly this day and time, depends on it. We don't worship dead leaders, understood? Because the problem, if a leader's dead, you can't ask them no questions. Or if a teacher's dead, you can't ask them no questions directly, you understand, unless you've got mastery of the physical and the esoteric. So it's better to have them here while they're here and ask the questions while they're alive, so they can respond to you physically. Now, we've done a reasonable job, some might say, of introducing key ancestors to us and how they lived and what their importance was. Remember, the Master's written over 1,000 books. You think about it, we've done, this is part 4 of this class. We're already on, I don't know, somewhere like 400 slides. And it'll be fair to say we've just touched upon the surface of these two subjects, and we've gone into a lot of detail. Understood? So we've definitely gone into the surface of these things that we're talking about here. And primarily it's getting individuals to look at things and understand what's going on with the planet. And we've taken a lot of time, even though it's, you can say it's a white man's terminology, words, etc. But getting you to focus astronomically as opposed to astrologically. Yeah, because astrology, I say by many, is considered pseudoscience. But what we're interested in is astronomy. And the reason why we're interested in astronomically is because astro, obviously dealing with the stars, the nomi side is dealing with the law, understood? So in that wording, it's the law that governs the stars, understood? So we're interested, of course, we're interested in the nature of stars, because when we talk about Parnatharu, what are we talking about? We're talking about stars. Yeah, cosmologically, we're talking about stars. Understood? Yeah, astrophysics, that's what we're interested in. Yeah, the physicality of stars, the laws that govern the stars. Yeah, because we are a star, we just happen to be a terrestrial representation of them. So when we envisaged Parnatharu, we envisaged suns, SUN suns out there, male and female. That's what we envisioned. And we are their descendants descending down from that gaseous or energy state, materializing obviously into the physical as star children. Understood? Yeah, star children, called the Negroid, all of us obviously originating from the Sands people. Now we went through Paterak, I think it was Solomon and Makeda, in some detail last week, which taught us about this individual by name as Hatshepsut, or Hatshepsut as they refer to us, or Ma'at Ka'areye, as she was also known. And a very interesting individual, the second female pharaoh, but longest ruling female pharaoh, and pharaoh to reign in ancient Tamaray. So a very interesting individual. Yeah, so a hermaphrodite, understood, so who was a woman, so in a female body, who internally was male. So she was both male and female as a hermaphrodite, but female leaning more towards the male side, but she was female. The characteristics of those gatekeepers is that they have double the energy of a normal human being, not double genitalia, that is a defect, but they had more energy in the sense than the normal human being, and thus far, which we're going to talk about today, they were able to open up certain gateways, which are necessary again for this day and time. And we're going to work through the Tulli Papyrus and see what those characteristics mean for us, well, what they meant back then and what they mean for us now in this day and time. So this is some depictions of Hatshepsut or Satak. And one of the interesting things to say, when you look at the Sphinx, Paruti, as it's called in the Misbatia language, you see that the face was, and this is her on the face of the Sphinx or lion, that it was a feminine image first. Yeah, so there's a feminine image on the lion first, which ties into Tefafnatat or Tefnut in San Sachmet, or as well, who they refer to as, so anthropomorphically, so that's basically showing the symbolism of how it's shown, as I say, in ways, showing that symbolism in a physical way. It can be, as you see, sometimes human body, face of an animal, so on and so forth, mask of an animal, I should say, in that regard. And that's symbolism being expressed. So something's being expressed, maybe about the nature of the animal, something's being expressed about a certain idea or concept in that way. So when you see certain depictions, you're going to know that there's a story or meaning or facts that sit behind it. Now, interesting when you look at the word Tulli Papyrus, Tulli is not a term that's even associated. Tulli would not have been known in ancient Egypt. I mean, the term would not have been known. It's got nothing, in fact, to do with ancient Egypt. But when you do look into that term Tulli, you find, there's an interesting eyebrow-raising story behind it. So here we see the Museum of the Vatican, and sitting behind it here. And interesting place. One may consider, very beautiful architecture, certainly a place that you might want to go and visit if you were in the area or the region to see what's going on. I think, remember, we showed you, if you sort of zoom in there, remember we showed you, I think, the front of that on another slide, where we were showing about the symbolism of the third eye and how you see it in different cultures around the world, taken from ancient Egypt with the pine cone, if people remember that. Now, so we sort of, a cheeky way say thou shall not. And this is because the Vatican Museum, or Musei Vaticana, or Vaticani, my Italian's not great, but same Vatican Museum. So a number of museums around the world which are holding artifacts from different people's cultures. Now, one of those, in actuality, because I have a department of Egyptian and, as you say, Near Eastern antiquities. So they're holding over 10,000 pieces of items from our culture, understood, yes, which have been stolen, let's be honest. They've been removed from their places of origin and stored in the museum. And at any one time, maybe 1,000 of those are on show. So the Vatican, you understand, apparently is the holiest city for Christians here on the planet Earth. But the museum itself, I don't know, people may feel differently about different museums. Some may see them as preserving culture. Some may see that, today, for example, but one may see that how they got those items is not always in the most ethical ways. And they obviously have to understand this and know this. But, these things are precious. What would be the word? Yeah, they're precious, I suppose, to the human race. They're precious to certain cultures, etc. They're not necessarily eager to give a lot of these things back to the countries that their ancestors took them from without permission. You understand? So, right in the wrong, so to speak. So, in Exodus chapter 20, verse 15 to 17, you see, thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Well, certainly from a Christian perspective, they have been at the forefront of, and arguably supported by so-called Jews as well, of giving Egypt a bad rap. You know, it's their movies, their storytelling, so on and so forth, that gave Egypt a bad rap. And when you say giving Egypt a bad rap, you're saying giving Africa a bad rap, because Africa is in Egypt. So a lot of the reason why certainly Nagarnadu or Negroes today have an issue with ancient Egypt is because of the propaganda that's been pushed upon you as a child, the whole Moses and Pharaoh story and so on and so forth. This has been indoctrinated in individuals, even if they didn't read the Bible. It's been indoctrinated in them that the Egyptians were a bunch of pagans, etc. And even today, Egypt, they try and make it look like somebody don't even know it's in Africa. That's how much the propaganda machine has been put out there, understood? But yet all of their prophets, all their major characters of their stories being masquerade as religions today all have some interaction with ancient Egypt. So isn't it ironic that they have a museum, understood, of Egyptian antiquities? Egyptian. You understand? Antiquities, yeah? Those who you say are the pagans, etc. You've got a whole museum that you're making money off of, understood? Yes, drawing people to, attracting people to your sort of sites and monuments here. But where are your artifacts for your stories and your religions? Yeah, where is Noah's Ark? Where is the Garden of Eden? Where is the remains of Adam? Where's the remains of Eve? Yeah, where's the remains of Abraham? Understood? The shroud has proven to be fake. So all the things that you should be attracting people to, understood, for your made-up stories, that's what should be the first and proper and center of your, or the most precious things there. But we find over 10,000 pieces of our culture being used to draw people to the museums that you say want to push out to the world. But when you look at, say, Exodus chapter 20, it's interesting things when you read it. It says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, yeah, not anything that is thy neighbor's. So you've got all these things holding in a museum, yeah, that you wish that you had made. You wish that you had designed, developed, and are showing that off to the world. You see the contradiction, the hypocrisy. Let's look here for a second. So this is taken from, the Vatican Museums, as they call it in English. And what was interesting about this article, and you can go and look it up in your own time, but if we look in terms of the detail, yes, we see here Alberto Tulli. So the Tulli Papyrus is named after the person who discovered, or apparently discovered, this piece of works or records, such as that records, not because it's associated with what was taking place in the culture where it's supposed to be from. Understood? So take that out of your mind. With Tulli Papyrus, more like a nickname, yes, but it doesn't relate to the actual culture of where it came to. Now, Wikipedia, if it's a particularly great source, but some unknown person who's put the article together here, it's not showing the person's name, consider it to be fake. Understood? So they consider it to be fake, but that the papyrus dated back from the reign of Thutmose III, and that they claim to be given that this individual here, Boris D. Rakowitz, interesting sounding name there, claim that it came from, or papers that were originally left by this individual, Alberto Tulli, yeah, as I say here, Vatican Museum director, who gave him, and then obviously he then presented it to the world, so to speak. Now, the interesting thing is that when you hear that name Alberto, for those who have a little bit of knowledge in our doctrine, if you want more information, check out books called The Luciferian Conspiracy, and another large book called The Degree of Mohammedism, I think, which is coming back into print, so you should be able to get that soon. And within The Degree of Mohammedism, they introduce you to a series of comics referred to as the Prophet. Yeah, so, and this is the reason why is because the Christian organization that developed it, you can look it up, and the name of it leaves me for the moment. But basically, they introduced, by way of a comic, some stories by an individual by the name of Alberto Rivera, you understand, who claims to be an ex-Jesuit priest. And in certain records in the Vatican, the Jesuit priesthood was a secret society within that particular order. I suppose the secret police of the Vatican, and that order holds a lot of secrets. So when you see the word Alberto, it's always interesting because you have the Order of the Alberts. Yeah, so and so it's a name really that's letting you know, okay, there's something going on there. Absurd, because the Order of Alberts, Albert Einstein, Albert Pike, Albert Mackey. Understood? Yeah, Albertus Magnus, yeah, the founder of their kind of ideology in relation to that. So those titles, oftentimes, some of them are associated with Freemasonry, and you have Prince Harry, whose name is Prince Albert, for those who don't know. So his real name is Prince Albert. So Harry's his middle name. So in actuality, when you look at these types of things, it should raise your eyebrows, understood, into what's going on here, because what the prophet shows is that the Vatican, or the Catholic Church, is responsible for the creation of Islam. So they developed a religious culture in order to basically control the region of Mecca, which it should rightfully be called Becca with a B, not M at the start, in order to control that trade route and the people that were there. Very lucrative trade route, and they wanted to control it, and they needed a religion there, or developed a methodology, I should say, of converting people to this religion. But it was developed by the Catholic Church. You understand? Even the word salam, which they say means peace, but it really translates as safe and secure, is linked to the word salut. You understand? Where they what Italians say, you know, so when they're after a decent meal or whatever, they're linked to the same word. So they developed a methodology within the Catholic Church of converting people around different cultures around the world, as you know, to Catholicism, understood, and the Middle Eastern version of that to control the Arabs in that region was the Islam, understood. And if you look at Muhammad's first wife, Mary the Coptic, she was a nun who was specifically deployed, understood, and taught Muhammad. Look at who taught Muhammad as well, or introduced the religion of Islam to Muhammad. Both of these were agents who worked for the Catholic Church. You understand? I'm not going to go too much into that, but look up those particular books to go more into that story. Now, why is it relevant to what we're talking about here? Because of this term Alberto Tulli. You understand? So the Tulli Papyrus, this individual is connected to a lot of mysteries and secrets. Yeah, the Jesuit priesthood is connected to a lot of mysteries and secrets around that. And I say all of the Alberts infiltrated Euro Freemasonry. Freemasonry is not the Illuminati in its original origins. It got infiltrated by the Illuminati, or the adverse version of it, let's say, because the members were judges, police, do you understand, politicians, royalty. So they had a lot of power. So in order to execute, that kind of protocols of the Elders of Zion, as was one of the Bavarian chapter of the Illuminati, which came out, this was a perfect cover because the world pays little attention to what this order's doing, understood? And so they got infiltrated. It's not that their origins were of that. They got infiltrated by it. So Illuminati is not necessarily a bad word. If you think about, just means illuminated ones. Yeah, most institutions, university, higher learning institutions on the planet all have an Illuminati within those organizations. It's called an alumni. Yeah, of ex people who went there who try and support it, whatever, mostly financially, but teaching, mentoring, doing different things. So, when you look at the words, I suppose it doesn't mean the same thing, obviously, but this particular group of individuals obviously have their own agenda, which we're seeing obviously some of that play out today. But maybe some, I'm not saying they are powerful, but sometimes people attribute more power to them than maybe should be ascribed. They're not in control and always subject to what's taking place around nature, and ultimately they're under the control of extraterrestrials in that regard. Obviously, we look at the hierarchies involved in that, and that's really the Dracos, or the winged class Dracos, are at the top of that hierarchy. Now, so Alberto Tulli, we can see here, some perceive it to be fake. You need to do your own research and judge what you perceive to be the facts in this particular instance. What we're doing today, we're giving you the Tulli Papyrus from our perspective. Now, there's always been a close connection, unbeknown to most, on the Catholic Church to ancient Egypt. So their origins really start from a very famous pharaoh, as you know, or Cleopatra the Seventh in particular, and she is a sacred feminine that deserves a lot of, not because of the way she's been depicted in movies. They've sort of grabbed her and really taken her story and excuse my French, but bastardized it, in the kind of worst way, because it hides really a tremendous sacrifice which this sacred feminine, Nagar, Nadu, Negroid, female had to make in order to save our people in Egypt at that time, because Rome was an ascending world power. Egypt was a place, or that part of Africa was a place to be taken over, overstood by this advancing world power. And she managed to save her people, or certainly make life maybe a little bit easier for her people, by basically being part of the Order of Hathor, which we may touch on a bit later, or maybe more detail in part 5, because they knew certain secrets. You understand? How to rock a man's world, let's say. And so she had control, at least, or some element of control, of between two men, Julius Caesar and, sort of at one time, second in command, I suppose, Mark Antony. Understood? And so they stopped maybe the invasions or incursions in a maybe more aggressive way into ancient Egypt. When we think about some of the sacrifices that sacred feminine had to make over the years, if we think about the kidnapping of our people taken into the West, and what our genes had to endure, and what women had to endure, rape, and how even as sacred masculine, we've been forced to stand by because we didn't have the power to really properly defend our woman, which is a natural nature, I suppose, in that regard, and how the genes got polluted. So today we see in social media a lot of back and forth, I think, between male and females, like there's some war going on. And I caution us to look at it and make sure that it's real, and it's not something that it's real, because the influence again of social media, fake stars, etc. Because sometimes the situations or scenarios that they're talking about is about athletes and their relationships, or actors and actresses and their relationships, and different things that are going on there, etc. And it's hyping up both sides. You see, so you have to be careful. Is that my reality? Is that what I'm really seeing around me, or is that something that's being influenced by the media? And then now, because I've internalized it and I'm projecting it outwards, remember, reflection and projection, that actual facts, I'm internalizing it, and then it's becoming my reality based on what I'm seeing. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is something we have to be careful of. But whereas I suppose at a certain point, male and female, we have to be able to look into each other's eyes and forgive each other ultimately, because we're both victims in that regard. Not that we are victims, I'm saying we become victims, but it's based on what's been done to us. And we both need each other to get ourselves out of the mess that we're in. Do you understand? So yeah, we may want to blame each other for a lot of stuff that's going on, but is it really each other, or is somebody controlling the pendulum? Overstood? Yes, that's swinging us to the right and the left. And as the master said, you have to climb Jacob's ladder symbolically and take back control of that individual who's swinging that pendulum. Yeah, and maybe causing us to be at each other's throats, so to speak. So anyway, Cleopatra and Mark Antony had relations, and they birthed a son named of Cleophas. Yeah, you see in their Bible as Colossians 4:11, one of the 3 Jesus stories in there. In the sense, you can see there, last female Para'aha. So, is that right? Para'aye, excuse me. Aha, you understand? Temple of the sun, moon, yeah, Pharaoh to rule. As you know, Mark Antony, as being part of the Roman shrine, was considered a deity. Cleopatra, as part of the Tamarian or Egyptian royal family, was also considered divine in that regard. So them two coming together produced a son of deities, yeah, son of God, correct? As you can see there, it was illegal for a Roman to have sex with another woman. So who was not Roman. So they practiced a form of eugenics, one may argue, or national eugenics in that regard. And so he wasn't accepted by the Egyptians, and he certainly wasn't accepted by the Romans for that reason. Yeah. Conceived at an orgy, as you said, she mastered certain abilities, understood, out of the order of Hathor, and as I say, had a man knocking at his knees, so to speak. Yeah, so he was rejected for those reasons that I've expressed. And arguably, in both cultures, being who he was the son of, he potentially could have ascended to both thrones in that regard, but wasn't able to. And travelled around the world and was known as, around the world, but he travelled around the East, I should say, known as Saint Isa. So he gives birth to a lot of stories or records of Jesus being in India, because it's that character, so to speak, that fits that story. So here you see some of the biblical quotes associated with him. Yeah, it's called Jesus Justus. And it says son of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Yeah, and so these are some of the names that he was known by in that regard. And as I say, he has a birth and a death date, so on and so forth. And Freemasons know some aspect of this individual story, because that's who they sometimes get confused with, yeah, because he fits that narrative of the New Testament story that was created by Flavius Josephus, who created a play that we see there as a New Testament, but had links to the Ptolemy dynasty, which, as you can see there. So they had access to some of the Egyptian mysteries, arguably have incorporated that into those stories. So none of which has, say, been proven. The Jesus story, as I give it and say in the New Testament, has not proven itself to be factually correct. So, as I said, it's still respected. So this is where Egypt, you're getting now to the later dynasties. So Ptolemy, remember, is a mixed kind of Romans, coming in there, Greeks, as well as Africans, taking that African culture. But so where we're more mixed out, and these are a lot of sometimes the images they want to show to the world, because we were more mixed then. Still us, but one drop of chocolate, in milk, it becomes chocolate milk. So still us in there, but much more mixed out. And so they like to focus on Ptolemy dynasty to tie themselves into the vine. Understood? So you do see a mixture there, but as I say, Cleopatra the Seventh has to be respected as, sacred feminine, you think about in slavery and things that have happened where they've had to, forcibly been raped and so on and so forth to keep the peace. So this is not something new. So as men, we have to be careful how we move as well, because as I say, in the genes, still remember, we're always 4 generations. We talked about this in some detail the last class. We're always looking at ourselves. We've got to look 4 generations. Now, people use words like generational trauma, etc., and different things of that nature. Yes, those are things that we certainly have to be aware of, because they're part of our being, the positives and the negatives of that. But I think it's more saying, look, the battle, the fight, etc., is not over. So you have to manage your genes in that respect. And they knew what they were doing. Their issue was to tie themselves into the vine, to take some of those genes, give themselves longer longevity, cure the diseases. That, as I say, the person who put the individual that put them in their position, or that position, is their gods, their deities of their religions. Understood? They gave them the weak genes. Yeah, they're in the image and after the likeness of their God. But obviously they saw a mechanism to enhance their genes by mixing in with us. Understood? So, well-formulated plan, but all based on hate. And we have to overcome that, and that medicine that we're using to do that is Wu-Sabat, spiritual science of us, as the Nagara Nadu. So here we see a few images we're taking in from Jesus Found in Egypt, another book probably worth getting related to the subjects we've been talking about today. But we see Sekhmet as the lion here, lion-headed deity, anthropomorphically shown. We see the Apis bull, Yeah. We see the supreme being Osiris, as it's shown there as a man. Supreme being Horus. Let's just say that Horus with the falcon headed, or the fowl. And then, interesting enough, we see the Enkidu, which is a Sumerian interpretation, so the bull man, Sumerian interpretation of what was Paruti, the Sphinx. You understand? And what you notice is that the characteristics, or how they're shown anthropomorphically, we see here what? We see the lion, yeah, we see the bull, we see the man, and we see the fowl. Understood? Yeah. So we know that the origin of that is from ancient Egypt, yeah, in the form of what is being referred to as the Sphinx or Paruti. And here we see that the Sphinx, which is say that face was originally female. Yes, originally female, got changed later, but it was originally female first. And we see here, over 10,500 years ago, that the Sphinx in its original design, or Paruti in its original design, at a certain point from the Earth looking up, was looking at the Leo star constellation. Understood? So, as you say, geodesic marker. So that's say, okay, so when we're looking at Earth upwards, we're seeing that certain monuments are basically aligned with certain star constellations. Yeah, so they as a planet rotates, certain constellations will appear in the sky or aligned at a certain point. And so you see this predominantly as part of our culture when we built certain monuments, etc. And as we expressed, we are the only race of people who really built heaven on earth. Do you understand? Because obviously we're seeking to match or align ourselves with our ancestors, you understand, as the Panatharu and the ascension pathway that they have left us to become them. And so we explore more into the constellation detail in the final part of this class today. However, as you see, the cat, the fowl, bull, and the man, yes, that we see there is part of the Sphinx. Yeah, and we talked about the riddle of the Sphinx before. I've said it so many times in this class. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but you see the riddle of the Sphinx relates to the journey of man, isn't it? Yes. So what has 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening, obviously relating to man, the riddle of the Sphinx, yeah, man inclusive of woman. Yeah. So, but the original Sphinx had wings. Yeah, so you can see here depicted, just like you saw in Enkidu, the bull man, which was copied from Paruti or the Sphinx. Understood? No, we'll leave that. But well, no, let's say, but the obviously the science of it having wings relates to extraterrestrial travel. Understood? So that's why symbolically it relates to having wings, because it relates to travel. And as you know, extraterrestrial travel, sometimes as it relates to the stars, symbolically speaking, is because they know, well, to them looking at certain things, wings is how, yeah, we're looking at certain animals or whatever, wings is what that creature has, which enables them to traverse the skies. Understood? Yeah. Now, obviously here, some of you will be familiar with this already, but you can see in the Bible symbology, yes, we see the quotes here for Paruti or the Sphinx, so Revelations 5:5, discussing about the Lion of Judah. Understood? And it's not just Jesus that they associate with that. Another character that they associate with that is also Satan. You understand, who they call? Now, we know in the culture that they're one and the same, time back into this individual Nana, whose name in the Sumerian doctrine is Master of Fire in their story, but that's maybe something for another day. But the lion there, you see the symbology of that. The lamb of God, yeah, you see there, calf or bull, Son of man, you see Matthew chapter 12, verse 32, and then you see the dove or the Holy Ghost as the eagle. So this symbolism that you see there in the, I suppose, the religious world, in this case, it happens to be Christian, but you see it there in Judaism, you see it there also in Islam, of these tie-ins back to ancient Tamaray, understood? And so you can see the way the confusion comes in for you as individuals, for me as an individual, because your culture's in there, but somebody's pulled it apart, you understand, switched it around, moved dates, times, places, so on and so forth, and then rehashed it back to you in this kind of Roman, Greek, and Arab hybridization of your culture. Yes, this is why the word Bible and the word Babel, which means confusion, they're very close phonetically for this reason. It was designed to confuse. But it gives itself a validity, or some kind of tie-in by making it seem or appear real, because symbolically it's tied to certain things. So one of the interesting things why, in fact, in Patriarch, sacred feminine, and Patriarch, Nuwapian man, or sacred masculine, if you want to call it, refer to it as that, it tells everybody, yes, women should be part of the Order of the Eastern Stars, and males should be part of the Blue House, the Sabian Grand Lodge, so to speak. Because one of the things that you're going to learn within this school of travel that we're going through is that you learn symbolism. Masonry is the language of symbolism. So if Masons put their hand in and were messing around, you understand, and put in their input into the Bible, it's going to be symbolism in there. Understood? Now, we as ancient Egyptians, ancient Africans, we put symbolism in there to keep knowledge away from the fall, but also to give meaning to the fact that you've got the world that you can see and the world that you can't see. Understood? So it's letting us know mentally, hey, pay attention. Descendants, pay attention, children, pay attention, those who respect the culture and are willing to listen, because we've got the visible world and the invisible world. And both are tangible to us. Because we're interested in the darkness. We're not just interested in the light. The society has you focused on the light, which is really fire. Not on the darkness, which gave birth to the light. So we're interested as ontologists from where we came from. And to the symbolism, as we expressed that before, for us, how we used it, yes, to the individual person looking at it, or the foreigner, so to speak, it keeps knowledge away from the fool, you understand, and those who want to think like them. But to us, it's giving a window into who and what we are, understood? So we were told to be in schools. Why? Because you're learning their stuff into walking back into our culture, where all of that stuff really came from, regardless. But it trains both male and females how to work together. But it's by the time you get back to ancient Egypt or Tamaray, remember, when you look at the nine, you understand, who the Greeks refer to as the Enneads and so on and so forth. We've shown you in previous classes in this session, they're both wearing the same outfit. So male and female are both wearing the same outfit. I think I explained that in a previous session, how naturally, isn't it, as we start to get older, through the decline of testosterone in males as they get older, and the decline of estrogen in women as they get older, how we become a more neutral being as we reach old age, in preparing for our spiritual etheric transition. Still, we come back more to the original, the hermaphrodite and hermaphrodite origins are where we came from. So it's important that you recognize that, how that symbolism game has been played in their religious books. For those who have come from that school of thought, or may have been raised in that school of thought, to really see, man, this is where it came from. That's important to understand. It's been given to us so many times around. Remember, at the end of Lost Records of Time, it says we're moving from linear progression to cyclical evolution. So each time you're being given it, it's almost like, as I say, you're giving it a next higher level. So some of these things, and this is the amazement of this doctrine, how those tie-ins all link together. Jesus found in Egypt is not a new scroll. You understand? It's certainly over 20 years old. But some of the stuff that it was kind of drilled into you to learn, I say it's quite significant. I mean, over 400 plus pages of yeah, look at this, look at this, look at this, where this came from, look at where that came from, look at where this image came from, look how that verse ties into something that took place way back when, just to make and hit home those points. Yeah, and the cosmology around that. Yeah, how this just ties into movement of stars, planets, births and deaths of solar systems, etc. So Giza and Egypt in that series, that was one series. Then you had Luciferian Conspiracy, then the beginning scrolls. I mean, I'm just talking about those books alone is certainly 1,300 pages almost in the sense of detail. That's just 3 sets of books. One point, you understand, that it's trying to express or teach you this link between, stars and their stories, but then, the real origin of all of this is our story is in the stars. You understand? So you can get that, you can lock that down. A lot of fog, so to speak, will be removed from that third eye of yours to see things how they're really supposed to be seen. So, you can see there from the kind of Right Knowledge series, I mean, Master, I think, was breaking this down in 1992, 93, before then even. So Holy Cat, so Mark Antony, the descendants of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, they worshipped the Holy Cat. Yeah, the Holy Cat was the Sphinx. So if you read it with dyslexia, going against the law, because they read from left to right. If we go against that and look at it in reverse, we get Cat Holy, Cat Holistic Sciences. That's where the word Catholics comes from. Yeah, the worship of the Holy Cat or the Sphinx, which you see there ties right back into that Lion of Judah, etc. You understand? So feline worship in that regard, which still is prevalent to them today. So you can see why, for example, if you really look at their true origins of where they come from, you can see why. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, why they would retain that Egyptian connection, because they've given the world one view, yes, perception of by what they say, but what they do is something different. Do you understand? They're Christians, but when you look at the Pope is wearing the yarmulke of the so-called Jew. Listen, you see the Pope is wearing the yarmulke, yeah, which is the and the Muslim is wearing a version of the yarmulke. It just covers the whole head, not the molar chakra, so to speak, yeah, which you refer to as a takia. They have other names for it as well. Yes, so it's all the same. It's all the same thing. There's different versions of the same thing. So, as I say, I present one thing to the world, but then when you look at the practice, it's something very different. Yeah, and so you need to pay attention to both what they say and what they do. So, any questions? I've rabbited on a bit. Any questions?
No questions.
Right. Okay. So, to Papyrus. So, if you want more information, go into the book, purchase the book, support your local bookstore, and so get into that. Have your own copy, whatever the case may be. So, we see here that we got 3 breakdowns in the book, and so we see the interlinear translation, which has been provided for here, and then helpfully, I suppose they've separated out some of the hieroglyphics and then put it against certain words. So again, so obviously when we're looking at these hieroglyphics, properly called Safaf, yes, a Safaf. This hieroglyph is what the Greeks refer to as a hiero. I think it's sacred, and then glyph writings or writing. So the word for us is Safaf, and that's Safaf really relates to the obviously the symbols here they're being used. So they have a phonetic meaning, but they also have a symbolic meaning insofar as the way they're used. Understood? So a combination of both. And then, some previous sessions we've gone through some of these symbols, what they mean, some obviously are particularly obvious, and then some not so much. So interesting. I say you either get a copy of the book, or you, when you're watching this class or whatever, you can look and just look at them in a bit more detail and see what's going on. You understand? So you get a copy of the book, look at some of the symbols, take some of the language and the pronunciations that we've got in Miss Batia, and overlay certain things and see, okay, can I work out, what that word is, what it means. We've expressed to you about seeing here the sort of wah sound with that horizontal water symbol there, and some other things see here. Interesting enough, and you look at our number system, you see that correlation in there, what you're learning today in Sabaic, and you see some interesting comparisons there. So it's not just something that's just made up. Obviously, it's reorganized, reimagined in this day and time for us, where the genes have tumbled forward, and for us to learn what it is now, but also it having firm ties back to the original. Yeah. So let's look at it. In the third version, let's walk through some of the detail here. Helpfully, very helpfully, the master teachers and obviously the team that's put the scroll together have included some symbolism, some of the symbolism that we see. Okay, we're reading that in this papyrus, that was tied into the reign of Thutmose III. We went through his story last week, and his mother, Ashtat or Isis, but his stepmother. Remember, we went through that, so stepmother. We went through that, but also his auntie. We went through that to show, remember, how he ascended to the throne, because Hatshepsut had the mitochondrial DNA. You understand? So we were showing you, remember, with the Tutankhamun, if you remember, and his wife, how she, because of her, she had the royal lineage, and how she gave birth to Tutankhamun's ability to rise to the throne, and a similar situation here, not necessarily by way of marriage, but Thutmose III's stepmom, we don't use that word stepmom for people's understanding here on the call, basically because she had the royal lineage, she gave birth to his ascension to the throne before she passed away. Now, what it effectively is doing is recorded an event that took place in Thutmose III's reign, and so that's what you need to be paying attention to in terms of cultural context. So let's walk through. So let's read it from the English because it makes it a bit easier for everybody, I think. So it says, in the 22nd Shamut year of the third month of winter, Ma'ad season, at the 6th hour of the Zamut day, there was much noise among the scribes of the temple of Hathor, house of the birth of life. Understood? It was noticed that a strange, sparkling, saucer-shaped mityar aircraft-like disc was coming down from the Parpatat, the sky above. Yes, so that's what we're saying from the Tulli Papyrus. Now we see, okay, well, that sounds interesting. There's a similar thing in their Bible above. So Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 13 to 16, verse 13. And the likeness of their faces, they had the face of man, the face of a lion on the right side. They four had the face of an ox on the left side. And they four also had the face of an eagle. 14. And the living creatures ran and returned as the appearance of the flashing lightning. 15. Now, as I beheld the living creatures, behold, one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures with his four faces. 16. The appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the color of a beryl. And they four had one likeness, and their appearance and their work was as it were a wheel in the middle of a wheel. Luke chapter 10, verse 18. And he said unto them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from the heaven. So you should now know, I mean, because we've just worked through and what was explained in Jesus found in Egypt and in the degree of Christism, you'll find in there as well. But you see here where that symbolism is going to, and as we expressed, from a certain place, we understand those wings relate symbolically to crafts. Yes, in the original Paruti or Sphinx. Yes, you've seen it described. It doesn't say Sphinx, but you can see there where their symbolism has been taken from, right, lifted right from your culture. Yeah, so that similar, verse where that similar or inspired verse, you can see where it's coming from there. So that's why it's intersected those biblical verses into this translation of the Tulli Papyrus there. 3, it did not have a dome on top of it. 4, the breadth of its opening emitted a foul sulfur smell. 5, its shape in size was 5.5 yards by 5.5 yards in height and 9.5 feet by 9.5 feet in length, and the same width around it. Yeah. Here sounds similar to Zechariah 5, chapter 5, verses 1 to 2. 1, then I turned up and lifted mine eyes and looked up, and behold, a flying roll. And he said unto me, what seest thou? And I answered, I see a flying roll. The length of it is 20 cubits, and the breadth there 10 cubits. 6, so stepping out Bible now. It made no sound. Verse 7, it came down towards His Majesty's house, the Huti Masas Parthalan. Just one moment. The Huti Masas Parthalan, Thutmose III, whose true name is Manan Chapap Reye, or Menchep Rey, of Makdash Shalel Amun Reye, temple of Amun Re, son of Chapap En Reye, or Thutmose II, and Arashtat Isis. Yeah. He was 8. He was related, so this is going into his story. We touched on this, remember, in Solomon Makeda. Yeah, so good to go back over and see some of the proper pronunciations of the Egyptian, the Musbatia way to properly pronounce some of these tones, because you've got bastardized versions of the way they pronounce some of the words, So being familiar with Musbatia, you kind of get to know the tones that they should be sounding today. 8, he was related to Ma'at Ka'ah yes, we just was talking about, or Hatat She'ep's attack, Hatshepsut. 9, the scribes and others all become confused at such a sight, and they fell prostrating to worship. 10, then stood up and ran to tell the Nasat, ruler. So remember we explained the difference between ruler and the pharaoh, in terms of those titles. You can be one or the other. You can be a ruler and not be a pharaoh. Understood? But generally speaking, they're ruling and they are also the pharaoh. So are the point person, understood, for the Nefaru, understood in that regard. So Pa Para, so Pa Para, the temple, Raye Aha, understood, so the temple of the sun and moon. So Thahuti Masas Parthalan Thutmose, to inform him of what is being seen. The ruler, Thahuti Masas Parthalan, to Hutimos. So we see, look, so here, look at the word. So you see Thutmose, Mose, child, Masas, child, So I'm a student or a child of Tahuti, the third in that regard, Ordered for the scribes to go to and locate the scrolls in the Dendora, house of birth, Hathar's temple, so he could read and see what to do about this. So they've seen these crafts in the sky, Yeah, and as it's explained in verse 11, his first point of call is telling, you understand, the scribes, etc. Hey, this is where this information about this. Go and pick up the records, yeah, of what happened before when this happened, or if it happened before. Yeah. So interesting enough, they kept records about everything. So that's the importance of keeping physical records as well. And so not just talk. Yeah, writing things down, keeping records. So there's a problem. Yes, boom, you can go into the lab, not library, but go into your laboratory and you can see, hey, what does this book say about this situation? You know, how many people do that with this doctrine or claim to be Sabaean and do that with this doctrine? Okay, there's a problem. Okay, boom, let's go back and see what it says. Yeah, let's see what it says in our doctrine. Or are we just quick to give our opinion on a situation based off of our emotions at the time? Yeah, not say, oh, let me go back. Hey, let's see what it says. The brother or Harar M. Habab started off with the maxims or sayings, I think it is. So there he can go in, he can give you wisdom on certain situations, how to solve certain things. And we can be in agreement of it, because if we're both saying that we agree, we've factually checked out this doctrine, then that can govern and guide. Yeah, it can govern and guide us if we accept it. So why not go to that for the responses or the answers before we're quick to talk? Okay, remember, we don't learn Wu-Sabat. Wu-Sabat learns us. So why not go to ours for the answers and see how to figure things out, rather than constantly always going off the head top, which is what most people do, yeah, based off emotional responses, not facts. So, insane. I mean, sometimes the worst thing, well, I feel that the person is this, or I feel that they're that. Okay, that's cool, but that's just one type of sensory input. Yes, so in Master Secrets, Ultimate Reality, I think it's verse 77, if my memory serves me correctly. Yeah, it says, talks about, inspiration and revelations are attributes of reasoning. And must always be verified against actual facts. So I can have a feeling about an individual person. I may or may not be correct. So that feeling has to be confirmed by something else. I have to check that something factually with the person. It might align with the sensory input that I received from the individual. You understand? Some people say, well, I don't like the way the person talked. I don't like that. Do you know what I mean? The vibe I got from the person. Some people talk like the vibe I got from the person, or which is they're talking about the energy that you receive from the person. Yes, but then how many times have I didn't really vibe with the person. Then when you got to sit down and know them and vibe them, yeah, they're all right. They're cool, or it might be that you got a certain vibe from them, which was thing, and then when you talk to them, you didn't like them. So there is sensory input that you're using. And you need to corroborate it with other things. It's particularly important when you're dealing with this doctrine, and people might receive a dream, or they maybe receive inspiration, various different things, and then run off and think, well, because that was in my mind, that's the truth. No, it has to be verified against this doctrine. If you're going to talk on Wu-Sabat and saying that, people start tripping out, thinking I'm the incarnation of this, I'm the reincarnation of this particular, I'm etc. And if you then ask them to qualify it, people think that you're attacking the person because they've seen this or they've seen that, etc. Well, hold on a minute. Yeah, it's cool if you've seen whatever, but if you're going to express it to the world, so to speak, yeah, you need to qualify that. You understand? There's no, just because you received it, I'm not in your head. I can't see what you can see. And this is where service comes in. It's where you have to learn the hard way. Why? The reason why you have to remember quotes and remember certain things, because when you're explaining it to somebody else, yes, you read it and you understood it. When you got to explain to somebody else, the person needs a point of reference. So, where did you find that? Okay, it's in such and such. It's the selflessness that comes in. The selfishness comes in where you got to think about other people. I think before I came on, I was listening to one of the quotes there. Maybe Harar Habab can maybe find it again, but I think you read something like the divine, something to do with divine love. Before you can do that, you have to stop loving self or something of that nature. So that's obviously showing you, with that wisdom, is that You know what I mean? There's a something about serving other people that causes one to rise in their ascension journey. In fact, you can't rise in that ascension until you get into the service of others, because when you look at the sun and you look at the planet, you know what I mean, things in nature, that's what they're doing. The word nature from Parnatharu, overseers, yeah, the Morozaku, they provide. It's providers. Yeah, that's why you sit with all these pictures and showing quotes, etc. You know, yes, it can make the job easier, but the reason is so you can see it. You understand? I can't explain a map with my mouth. Certain symbols, yes, I could describe it, but why not take time and show you the picture? If I could stand outside and speak, and you see my face, and I sit in front of a microphone, or any teacher sit in front of a microphone and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. But it's easier to show you. A picture is 1,000 words. When we got the information, it was in a book form. It was full of pictures. And even if it's not full of pictures, to express it, we might have to create a picture to explain a certain concept. There's certain things in Wu-Sabat that we must master and know. Shout out to some of the brothers there out of Para number 1. Understand? Or white hand, whatever, or 1, Wahoo. Because doing the back to basics, because certain concepts you have to understand in Wu-Sabat. It's back to basic series to understand what is being expressed in our culture. It's not always about comparing us to what the Mukasa and their culture is saying. We use it for comparative studies. Otherwise, if we didn't have to do that, we wouldn't. We just focus on our stuff. But for comparative studies, sometimes to show the juxtaposition of the story, to help you understand what's really going on. Yeah, that's why we use their stuff sometimes to show that. Yes, you can see how the game was. How it was played. Yeah, so it helps you sometimes to understand, because we live in their culture, so on and so forth. So it's important, as I say, how we do things. Yeah, Master Secret number 1 tells you what an actual fact is, and it doesn't say it's just words. Yeah, explanations, examples. You understand? So we're using the new technology in this regard to help us to master what the master has been given. If he's a master teacher, then he's teaching stuff for us to master. In that regard. Yeah. And so that's what we deserve, at least if we say, we respect, we love, him in that regard, and the sacrifices that have been made, then you've got to put the work in. Understood? Too many of our teachers throughout the ages have said many things, and we were resistant, to it whilst the person was alive. They want to respect it when they're dead. Yeah, and then when they're dead, you can't say, what did you really mean in verse 8? I was confused. What did you really mean? We didn't get the opportunity to ask. Yeah, when we did have the benefit of the master out on the land, where was he? Was he up rolling around the streets of Georgia, you understand? Partying and things like that? No, every Saturday, if we keep it real, you could go there, or whatever time he was teaching, and say, hey, in this book, you said da-da-da-da-da. What does that mean? Was it not the same in New York? Hey, in this book, you said blah, 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 blah. You could ask direct. You get qualification direct, any and every question. You can't do that with many of these so-called other teachers. You can't do that. Can't walk up to them and say, hey, what did you mean by this? What is that? What did you mean by this statement? Yeah, last week you said such and such and such and such. Yeah, he made himself available. Wasn't one of those absent leaders in that regard. Yeah, as we find ourselves in religion. Can we get clarity on some of the things that were said in this verse? Okay, there's two. This could be read this way, or it could be read that way. What way is it in this particular Bible verse, or this Quranic verse, or this in the Torah? What way does it go? Yeah, I can interpret it different ways. This is where the confusion comes in. Why they never ever wanted people to translate into English. Yeah, they will kill you if you translate the book, because they knew the confusion it would cause. Now, for you as Nagarnadu Negroids, it's all bullcrap. But for you to understand what that statement really means, you've got to put the work in. If you came from those different schools or degrees, if you're fresh to it as a youngster coming off, you never had no religious inclination or with those monotheistic religions, then you're only really reason for learning it so you can teach others of that particular degree, not for your own self-development. Anyway, back to where we were. So the scribes ran over to the temple of Dendora when they wanted some records about what was going on to do with this crafts that they've seen in the sky. Verse 11, it said, Thuhuti Masas, part of the land, Thutmose III, thought about what was going on and what he read from the temple scrolls. This means they knew about crafts already. 12, this continued for 3 days. 13, at the time, many more disc-shaped crafts had come and appeared in the Par-Patatat, the skies. Many more. Psalm 68:17, which reads, the chariots of God are 20,000, even thousands of angels. The Lord is among them, as in Sinai in the holy place. 14, they were all shining brightly in the Par-Patat, the sky, much brighter than daylight of Par-Shamash, the sun. Lord God, I will make thee. Sorry about that. Excuse me. They reached the north and south, east and west, extending to the limits of the sky. There were 4 cylindrical shaped crafts like pillars also up in the sky, giving off an extremely powerful sparkling light like fire, positioned for the sparkling saucer-shaped Mikbadat aircrafts. Exodus 13:21. We see a similar thing there. So it says, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light to go by day and night. 22, he took not away the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. It's back to the Papyrus. 16, the army of the ruler, the Thuhuti Masas, Parthalan, Thutmose III, all came forth and looked upward with the ruler to protect him. 17, so after the evening meal, they came out to see what the Mikbadat crafts were doing. 18, the dish-shaped craft started to ascend upwards into the sky towards the south. Ezekiel 9:4, and the Lord said unto him, O through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon their foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abomination that been done in the midst thereof. Ezekiel 12:22-23. 22, Son of man, what is that proverb that ye have in the land of Israel, saying the days are prolonged and every vision faileth? 23, tell them therefore, thus saith the Lord God, I will make this proverb to cease, and they shall no more use it as a proverb in Israel. But say unto them, these days are at hand, and the effect of every vision. 19, and they saw sumakat, fish, and all kinds of mutyaru, birds, falling down from the sky. 20, something they'd never seen before in all Tachyoi, creation of their country, Mahmat, Egypt, and the ruler, Thuhuti Masas, Parthalan, Thutmose III, told the Mukhan Amun Reye, priest of Amun-Re, to go bring incense to appease the heart of Nathar Amun-Re, overseer Amun-Re, the Amen of Revelations 3:14. And unto the angel of the church of the Laodiceans writes, these things saith the Amen, the faithful, the true witness, the beginning of the creation of God, the overseer of Upper and Lower Mahmat, Egypt. 21, and it was done, and it was ordered, that was the event was recorded for the Thuhuti Masas Parthalan, Thutmose III, in the annals, of the birth of the house of the birth of life, Dendora, temple of Hathor, to be recorded, not to be forgotten forever. So, by Amun-Nabab Reye Achachpata. So, you see here that we have a record that you can see again where they've copied a lot of their verses, stories, concepts from events that have taken place or recorded to have taken place in our culture. Understood? So Thutmose III basically was explaining or asked to be recorded this particular event of crafts in the sky. And as a result of that, uniquely, they saw fish raining, you understand, birds raining, and other types of creatures from the skies as a, let's say, a characteristic or as a consequence of these crafts appearing in the sky. Understood? Yes. So this is what we're seeing here now around the world today. If you do some research about certain phenomena of frogs, you understand, and different things falling around the sky, unexplained events. Yes, but we're seeing here in Kadem Mahmat, ancient Egypt, we're seeing here that potentially these events could be related to crafts appearing. Now, why is this important, I suppose, and why is it particularly relevant? Why is it relevant? I'm trying to remember why I put this in this order. But yeah, why is it relevant? Is because when we're talking about the gatekeepers, yes, and we went through Tutankhamun's story in some great detail, and we talked to you about Hatshepsut's story in great detail, is because what's happening here is when we look at the whole Tutankhamun story and how Ankh-en-Atun, Nefar Twi Nefertiti, Akhenaten, yes, what you're looking at is to keep it simple, is a failed gateway attempt. Yeah. So what they were seeking to do at that point, they had the right people who had the correct genetic configuration to be able to open up a gateway, but forces amongst them basically sought to foil that, to stop that gateway from being opened. Because when the gateway is opened, it allows basically for our ancestors to come through, in the form of IFOs, identified flying objects, one might describe, or more popularly known as UFOs, unidentified, you don't know what they are. Yes? So that gateway opened that opportunity for them to come through. Understood. Just checking, I can see something's offline here. Can you still hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can still hear you, Nabab Cap.
Okay. Oh. So I'm just checking. Okay, you're checking we're still broadcasting live. Okay, no problem. So yeah, because it's slightly early today, but we're looking at failed gateway attempts. Yeah, so this is what's taking place in that regard. Yeah, so you're looking at our record showing, they tried to open up a gateway here, and then in the case of Hatshepsut or Satak, her gateway attempt of opening was successful. Yes, so as a result of her opening up the gateway, the result was when Thutmose III was ruling, yes, the Huti Masas Path of land, when he was ruling, the event as a consequence of Hatshepsut opening up the gateway, that's what resulted in. Yeah, of crafts coming through because she successfully opened up the gateway. Something, again, that was attempted with, say, Tutankhamun or Atun, depending on what point you take his rulership from. So let's look at what opens up a gateway then. So we are back into our 4-in-1 principle. So in the book, Actual Facts number 19, who is God, male or female, they show you, Master teacher expresses a matrix. Now, obviously, as he's taught before, that you can look at a person's face, you can look at the maths and tell where a person comes from just by looking at their face. Yeah? So there's a mathematical formula, obviously, to the human body. We know a matrix is something we have to manage. In their language, it comes from the word, Latin word to mean womb. Yeah, but for us, it's a mathematical formula. So when people have plastic surgery, so to speak, and now today, they don't want you to criticize anybody who has plastic surgery. You understand? I mean, it's different if you've had a mastectomy or something of that nature, or something's happened, you're male or whatever, you've got some injury through whatever, some kind of accident or whatever, and you have to have surgery to correct that. That's one thing, you understand? But because somebody wants a bigger this or a bigger that, or smaller this or smaller that, you're going under the surgeon's knife, or for your face changing, it alters the maths. This is why it looks odd when you're looking at a person. Now, obviously, they could say, well, surgeons are getting better at it. You can't tell nowadays. Because people are changing their whole facial look, even at a young age where it's not even necessary. No accident, just because, people used to take the mickey out of me because I had a big nose. Okay, so you go into the surgeon's knife, and in some extreme cases, people have died on the table for this so-called perfect westernized look. Yeah. So anyway, the maths. So when you look at somebody and you can see something's not quite right, it's because the maths is off. Yeah. And so we didn't have a concept of ugly or beautiful in ancient times, because obviously if a healthy man and woman come together, understood, the output from that is going to be correct, isn't it? Do you understand? That's so 2 + 3 is 5. You understand? In at least a mathematical context. So that's just what the answer is. I remember at one time when we were thinking about in our early existence upon this planet, everybody looked the same. Everybody looked the same. So where was the? Yeah, I mean, where was the? Because the genes were purer, isn't it? So everybody looked the same as each other. Women all look the same. Understood? Yeah, the men all look the same. So the expression of yourself is going to be more from your personality and your soul, how that's expressing itself. But physically, we all look the same. Yeah. So you got to think, where did the concept of, colorism, that person's ugly, that person's a 4 out of 10, that person's a 6 out of 10, that person's an 8 out of 10. It only comes from when you have invaders coming in, and clearly a clear tactic to separate people amongst each other. And say, now you see the interference of people dipping in forcibly so into our genes, because if you look in a room of Nagarnadu, we don't look the same. You understand? I mean, it's very rare. I mean, say, oh, I've seen this person, they look similar, because we have certain tribal, because where we've come from, the genes expressing itself and where we've come from. So tribally, they've come from a certain place, a certain tribe, and there's certain characteristics that have given birth to our look. But generally speaking, you can put a lot of us in a room and we don't look like each other. So at one time, that was not the case. And when you look at books like Man from Planet Risk, and it describes you the physical aspect of the Riskian or the Morozaku, for example, they all look the same. So I suppose it's a perfect genealogy. There is no interruption in the genes. You can see, like, for example, with the Chinese and certain other Orientals, they look very similar, or Asians in that regard, but they look very similar because there's not been much outside interference in their genome. Understood? So they look the same. They're obsessed with the Western look, isn't it? In some of those Eastern cultures, obsessed, with that Western look. Again, becoming problematic. Everybody's supposed to be how they're supposed to be according to the extraterrestrials who created them. Anyway, back to what we're talking about here. So you're introduced into this map, and we've been given a matrix, 9 by 9, and we see here that we've got nines around here, and then in the center, we've got a 0, correct? But then we see here that, like our binary system, that 1 equals 9 and 0 equals 8. And they put a 0 in a minute, but that 0 in the center, but that can be a 0, but it can also be an 8, yes, because 0 equals 8, correct? So you can see that here. Yeah, and see that there, all mapped out. So 4 nines and an 8 in the center, understood, yes? Now, we spoke in some detail about mitochondrial DNA. We don't necessarily need to go into that in loads of detail. But just to show you again, for many men have seen this before, that the X and the Y chromosome are not the same. You understand? So they draw it in the alphabet, and they draw the X and Y, they draw them exactly the same size. But so to take that myth away from here, the X chromosome is 5 times smaller than the X chromosome. They don't even look like a Y. Understood? Yeah, it's a defective Y chromosome. Yes. So in that regard. So we deal with maths, we don't deal with myth. Yes. So the lesser cannot give birth to the greater. I went through that some detail in part 3. And as we've expressed today, the true records are the genetics, the genes. Yes. And the woman carries the royal genes of our line age, yeah, or through our line throughout the ages. Understood? So here again, the 4-in-1 principle. You should understand that by now if you've gone through these classes. That obviously, somebody from looking Earth upwards, that quality principle, isn't it? Yeah, it's the positions of the sun. But when so atom, amun, anon is the position. Yes, yeah. When the sun is in that position, then you add the rayé. So sun's in the position, yeah, then it's atum rayé. Sun's in this position, then it's atun rayé, amun rayé. Look at this now. There's no rayé there. Interesting enough, in the picture. The sun's still there, but you can't see it. Yeah, because this is obviously daylight hours into so-called sunset. And then we're in the Anun ray point, or Nun point, is perceived but not seen. Yeah, absent but still exists. You understand? And so it alludes to, again, the quality principle, excuse me, as you'd be familiar, that woman can be a woman, a mother, a daughter, and a grandmother in the same being. Understood. And you see our seasons, the 4-in-1 principle being expressed there as well. 4, but really 1. So symbolism in that regard. So there's a chromosomal map that we're looking at there that's been expressed in actual facts number 19. And here, when we look at our DNA, we see also 4 points here. Understood? Yep. What's the proper name for it? It's gone out my head for a second. The 4 base pairs. Yeah, 4 base pairs. So now, interesting enough, look at this. They're called adenine, thymine, guanine, cyto. So you hear the 9 in there? Yeah, the ein principle. Yeah, 9 principle in there. Understood? When we're looking at this map. Yeah, feminine, adi 9, thymine, guai a 9, cyto sign. Iron principle in this map. So, I say these base pairs, the most harmonic or frequency within DNA is the F sharp frequency. So F sharp. Again, very important tone and helping us to align, as I say, with the universe, but most prominent frequency is F sharp. I remember when you went into the pyramids, or when we constructed pyramids, they were helping or acted in one of their purposes as an interdimensional communication device. As you saw, might always be a door in a pyramid, but you saw certain times you saw windows. And obviously when the wind used to pass by these openings within these structures, yeah, the mirat, when opening past these structures, it made a certain sound, like much when you might see a person playing a flute or you understand, where they blow across the opening and it makes a certain tone. Well, those tones that you could hear, well, you couldn't hear them because they were below 20 hertz, understood, which is below the normal range of human hearing, which is between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz, understood. But what it was altering the person on a DNA level, and the structure. And as we explained, the Magaraj ceremony, understood, yes, ritual that was built was altering you on a atomic level, yeah, making the atoms vibrate at a more positive frequency. So our structures were not just nice things to look at; they had purpose. Understood? Yeah, correcting, aligning us with Parnatharu, and in that regard, what aligned with those key star constellations, isn't it? Yeah, Orion and Sirius. Any questions?
Yes, we have a question from Kafir, and the question is, Rahuba Musa, is the gateway going to open again? If so, when?
Well, if we knew the exact answer to that, I suppose people would wait till the day before, stay in the strip club. I'm just being facetious, but stay in the strip club the day before, change, and then be looking to, turn their life around 24 hours before, and then try and make that transition through. So the time is not known. The time is not known, excuse me, for that reason. And one of the things that we've been obviously talking about here, it's a good question, because one of the things we've been talking about is clearly we've been calculating time incorrectly. So when you say when, the first thing is, what does when mean? Yeah, because it's a case of the time would have to be calculated correctly to know when that event is taking place. That's one thing. And then nature doesn't directly work organically like that. So we can say, for example, a child is going to be born in 9 months, but until the child is born, that's when you know it happens. So it sometimes can happen on 9 months exactly. It can happen sometimes slightly after. It can happen sometimes slightly before. You understand? And still be considered healthy. So nature is not exact. It's not a digital clock in that sense. It is a what's the opposite of digital? The word I'm looking for. How do I remember? Help me out here.
Analog.
Analog. You understand? It's an analog thing. Toltec. Yeah, an analog system in that regard. So it's organic in terms of its time. What we have to be aware of, which is the first, I think the verse in Lost Records of Time, is to know time, to know the act, understand, or event by time. I'm paraphrasing, but the act or event by time, you must watch the skies. So it's the configuration of that which you know, okay, boom, the gateway is coming. It's the arrival of the Amun Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, which is an attribute to know, that time is coming. It's the birth of the golden children. That's boom, we know that this gateway is coming, because we learn about Tutankhamun and we say the golden child. In this day and time, understood, it's a plural, isn't it? Because when you talk about Haru, yes, or they say Horus, but we say in our language, we say Haru. It's is, yes, on high or whatever it means there in that regard. But the U denotes plurality, isn't it? When you say a Saru, you're saying more than one. So the Haru, the real Haru, is more than one. It's children, it's not child. Excuse me. And then when you refer to Pastor the golden children, this is what's going into, isn't it? That certain children were born between a certain period, 1973 to 2003, to intercept the genome, yes, to upgrade us obviously at a faster rate, but they needed to align with the Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, or this Tahuti. Remember, in the symbolism, Tahuti was always there to aid Horus in his battle against the Tuk. Understood? So they need to interact with this individual or being, because that Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn is able to discern in terms of frequency or vibration, it's a better way to describe it, between the different planes. So we all have the molecular construct of all of the planes within us, those 9 planes, but what we've forgotten is the ability to move between them, to transform, because we don't remember what the vibrational rate was for the next plane or the one above, so on and so forth. So you need a being who's able to discern between the vibrational rate of these planes. And when the golden child comes in correlation with that individual, their soul will enable them to sync in with the vibrational rate. That could be by way of touch or just being in close proximity to the individual, to then show them, this is what the physical plane, which obviously we're on already, but then the plane of force, you understand, spiritual plane, you understand, mental plane, so on and so forth, which have different vibrational rates. Then you know which each, because you're now in correlation, you're vibrating with each of them at all times, and then can move between them. Understood? So the gateway opening allows for, as I say, certain beings to come through. But as we're going to be talking about shortly, you need a certain configuration of individuals to open up that gateway. So first stage is develop those individuals first, and then they perform the ritual to open up the gateway at will at the appointed time. Okay? So a long answer to a short question. Any other questions?
Yes. We have a question from Kafir again. And the question is, what scroll is that? I can find that diagram. And the diagram that's being referred to is the tetrahedron-shaped molecule diagram.
Good question. No, sorry. I think it's tones, vibrational energies. Yeah, tones, vibrational energy. Let me not do that. Let me get the proper full title. Right, actual facts number 18. Yeah, tone, sound, DNA molecules, vibrational frequencies. Yeah, it's got a longer title than that, but that's a short title. So actual facts number 18, tone, sound, DNA molecules, vibrational frequencies. And thanks for pointing out, I will correct that, because usually we do put the source of the picture, but this is an older slide, so I've not done that for this one, but tell tap for that. Any questions?
Yes, there's another question. Here's one from Judith. So the next vortex is to open in 2023, correct? Is this considered a door Bawab as well? I think maybe that means doorway as well. If so, will the golden children have a part in this?
So, good question. So remember, the vortex is not the same as the opening of the gateway. So we're going to get into that slightly. But so the opening of the gateway is a certain type of, it's individuals of us who have a certain genetic configuration who can open that gateway at will. Understood? When you talk about vortexes, the planet, remember, goes through, has its own biorhythm. Yes. So every 10 years, these vortexes, which there are many of them, as you're aware of on the planet. Remember a lady, a Native American female by the name of Laurie Addie Toy, developed that I Am America map, which showed the different vortexes around the planet, 50 or so around the planet. So that opens up, remember, as a result of that Philadelphia experiment, it used to be on the 0 of every decade, and now it's on the 3 of every decade as a result of that Philadelphia experiment in 1943. So that happens naturally. So yes, you can have incomings because of those vortexes opening on the planet. That's a natural phenomenon. The gateway specific that we are talking about, that our ancient ancestors sought to open, obviously is in the Orion sky, and obviously the northeast corner, obviously, of that particular constellation. Understood? So that's in a very specific location, seeking to make that connection from that gateway. Now, obviously, any vortex, so to speak, that's occurring in a planetary way has the ability, I suppose, for people to travel interdimensionally, and also extraterrestrially. Do you understand? So there are two different things. You travel between dimensions, but also travel long distances in space over a short period of time by going through a vortex. You understand? It acting like a shortcut. So they're two different things. Although, as I say, those openings every 10 years are important because it's another mechanism for different beings, inclusive of our own ancestors, to come through on those points. Understood? But they are two different phenomena. Now, whether they happen in the same year, because it's optimum to do that, you understand, that could happen, but they're still, as I say, two separate phenomena. Any other questions?
Yes, there's a question from Dermot, and the question is, Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn comes every 24,000 years. Is that correct? But the Mukasu have not been here that long. So why would a Warner come here every 24,000 years?
That's a good question. So remember, it's a culmination. So let me do it two ways. The first thing, which we probably get into more in part 4, excuse me, is that the calendar was altered or changed as a result of an event that happened around about 12,000 BCE, memory serves me correctly, where the planet got knocked off of its axis. Understood? And that accident or devastation caused the formulation of a new calendar that was required. Hence, we have the Dendora star map. Understood? And so, because the position of those stars no longer powered certain monuments and things that we had on the planet, so it brought a new calendar into play, requiring, as I say, a slightly different approach to our development. Now, when we talk about elders coming in and correcting a Warner, obviously the job that's required now is significant because we've stepped away from, because we're so far away from what we were originally. But in times past, remember, in terms of starting a particular project, we still needed guidance as human beings in order to progress. Now, at one time, the Natharu walked amongst us. Other times, they didn't. Understood? So they still came along, as we progressed. Different elders within that 24,000 cycle would incarnate. So when we talk about the Amun, the Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, that's the last one to come. But you still had elders coming in. Remember, each one of those 1,000 years is symbolic of an hour and symbolic of a type of elder that will come in and teach for that period of an hour. It's just that the Amun, the Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn comes at the very end. So he's the 19th of the 24 that incarnates to take up the 25th seat, which if you imagine a circle with 24 spokes against it, then the 19th always occupies the 25th, so descends down onto the planet to offer, you know what I mean, and correct everything if necessary to bring us back to that ascension pathway that we should be on as Nagaranadu and obviously children of the Natharu. Understood? So it's not one elder, it's 24 in the position, each symbolic, as I say, coming down for 1 hour. Because if you remember, in Project 24, we were given, in Master Secrets number 1, we were given 24 things to master in this cycle. So those elders had set those standards for our race to test those genes for us to evolve into, where they expected us to be as their children. Mastery of time travel. You understand? Breaking down the periodic table and finding the elements that were beyond the 99. So there were certain things that we were tested upon, as it explains in say, Master Secrets #1, Birth of the Matrix. But we were hindered by the Caucasian in the last 6,000 years, hence why the problem is so significant. But it wouldn't have stopped, as I say, if we were, I don't know, not the devastating impact of them being created had not been as traumatic as it was, it wouldn't necessarily have stopped an elder incarnating to visit as part of, say, our growth as a race and development as a race. Any other questions?
No other questions.
Okay, so this 4-in-1 principle. So we see that our genes 4-in-1. We see the quality principle as 4-in-1, and what we see is that the mirat, or the pyramids that we were looking at, are, as I say, a bastardized. Keep using that word today. A bastardized version of what they were, because the Mohammedans, Muslims came in and basically invaded these areas and basically looted all of the precious stones, and the coverings that were on these pyramids. So they were covered with crystals. They took them and they used them to go and build their own mosques, synagogues, temples, so on and so forth. So they were covered with crystals. You're seeing it now with the exposed brick, is not how they were. They were covered in different types of crystals. Now, one of those stones was the quartz crystal. And interestingly enough, it has, correlations to us as human beings to aid that interdimensional communication. So when we look at the structure of the quartz crystal, we see that 4-in-1 principle again. Understood? So this is quartz. We see it at, it grows at a 52-degree angle, oftentimes, and you see it there. You understood? And that was in direct correlation with the angle of the way certain pyramids were built. Understood? Now, the reason why you see pyramids of different shape is it gives you in the Par Magaraj scroll, the journey within, that's what Par Magaraj means, is because it enabled us to study certain types of energy, tachyonic frequencies at plus minus and minus minus. So the shape of it, because as you know, it takes some rays and converts them into tachyonic energy. So it enabled us to study them in different ways. That's why you see pyramids with different shapes, on bent, different angles, so on and so forth. But these large pyramids in Giza were built at this 52-degree angle and then covered in certain crystals to, as I say, emphasize that type of frequency. And crystals, as we know, they store outformation. Understood? And you touching it can pull out that in the form of information to interpret. Obviously, today, most of you are on devices, on computers, isn't it, that store information. You understand? Just how we use our computers today and so on and so forth. Obviously, we're about to go to the next level of information storage in the form of quantum computing. So moving from zeros and ones to quantum storage of information. Obviously, we know from our own doctrine and studies that one of the most efficient forms of information storage is the human brain, which is storing information into information in the form of holograms. Yes, but here we can see, as I say, crystals, coverings, because they're receiving. Remember, we're receiving cosmic energy from stars which exist, maybe stars which have passed. We're seeing millions, trillions of cosmic particles for every waking moment within existence. They're being received, and so they may carry information about a long lost star system or culture or whatever the case may be, and it can be read and it can be interpreted with the right information. So the crystal stored it in the sand, and it was because, as I say, it had correlations to DNA effectively. You understand? So we used it in a lot of our architecture, etc. So here you see that, for those with a two-ball cane, we see that the square and the circle is describing the way in which the master builders built the pyramid. Do you understand? So using the plumb line to make sure that the alignment of certain bricks, etc., the way they were laid, were obviously in that perfectly straight line. And when we talked about earlier about the pendulum swing, well, if you look here, obviously, in terms of the course of our lives in this society, somebody has been moving us effectively from this illusionary world of opposites, point A to B, or whatever the case may be. And the hand that's holding that pendulum swing is at this point. So symbolically, we have to climb up that ladder. You understand, Jacob's ladder, I think they call it in their Bible. Symbolically, climb that ladder and then take back hold of that plumb line, or the pendulum swing, so that we're in control of what those choices are. So remember, Wu-Sabat is about balancement. So you don't want extremes. We're seeking to make this line a lot more still, if that is. If you think about it in your life, so maybe somebody, I don't know, you say, okay, I've not been that spiritual, whatever, I start, you know what I mean? So I'm going to start, chanting and get my diet and certain things out straight tomorrow. And what happens is you swing that, that pendulum, you go hard it goes hard to the left, you know what I mean? Because you say, I'm on it now. I put the drink down, I'm not smoking no more, boom, 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 boom. And what happens is you attract, because you've gone so hard, you attract loads of negativity, isn't it? Yeah, because you're trying to make a change. So, you know what I mean? Whether it's from inside of you or externally to you, yes, you attract negativity as a result of doing something positive. Yeah, because you've hit it with an extreme. But obviously, once you pattern it and it becomes more habitual, let me just close the window 1 second. Yeah, it becomes more a habit, understood, which we know habits are permanently formed after 30 days of continuous repetitive activity of that particular action, understood. Then this settles down, isn't it, more in the middle. So if you, I don't know, let's say you didn't chant, let's say you were continually chanting and it would now formed a habit for you. If you then missed it for one day, that drop is not going to be, it's not going to be an extreme movement, is it? Do you understand? It's going to be more of a smaller movement in the middle. So you got to think, once we master certain things, understood, yeah, we're operating at that level. So if I didn't do it for a day, I missed it, or even if I missed it for a week, it's become part of my being. I've mastered it so well that, you understand, I'm not going to have this big kind of swings, yeah, in life to get back up to where I was. Now, what I'm saying is, you might not be at your optimum quality because you've missed it for a few days or whatever, or weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. But it's not going to be a big swing for you to just get back into things. So getting to a point where you can master something where, okay, if I just got to jump back into it, it's not as big swings and leaps, is where we need to get to in all aspects of the mastery of our life. What tends to happen is that we're not even, we're swinging, like big pendulum swings, and it attracts, as I say, the adverse force to it, because if it swings this way, it's going to swing back with the equal amount of force. Understood? So this is where you have to get control, which effectively controls of one's mind and your willpower and how one is using it. Understood? And this is why, our behavior's key, but also environment's key, because 24%, as you know, of our DNA is in a transit state. It's constantly changing based on our environment. And so therefore, let's be honest, if you're around the right people, you're in the right environment, you tend to do the right things, unless you're, you know what I mean, that devil or disruptive force that wants to mess up the peace. You understand? And even that is something that has to be controlled within, you understand, in all parties. You understand? You know, the devil's an attribute, it's not a person per se in that regard. It's an action. So it can be the devil in that moment, or if you continuously doing negative acts, then you can be called the devil because you're constantly on that. You know what I mean? Destroying, in our definition of it, somebody destroys you, what your definition of peace is. Yeah, so we have rules and laws, etc., to keep the peace, so to speak, and the love and unity in the community. So here, as I say, you're seeing this 4-in-1 principle, and the reason why the crystal, or crystals, not just quartz, but crystals were used, but there was a special place for quartz, that we used it because of its link. As I say, it's naturally growing at this 52-degree angle, and we built structures in correlation to it also. Yeah, as I say, interdimensional communication device. So we can see there that the quartz molecule, yeah, with the 4 atoms of oxygen, with the silicon suspended in the center. We're just looking at 4 nines in DNA with something we're looking at in the center. So quartz crystal, you can see here the spiral shape of DNA, and you can see a similar type of thing with the quartz crystal. This how it's depicted, evolving in this spiral fashion. Okay, what time you got here? Okay. Right, okay, so I'm not going to go into this in loads of detail, but this is Patriarch Atlantis. Let's see what we can cover so we don't run out of time. Right, so in Patriarch Atlantis, it gives you the configuration of how to open up the gateway. Yeah, so quite simply, but it's given us it showed who the master is as well, who this Amenhotep Rayakta is as well. So let's go from, we'll go from 2 to 9. So the Atlantis myth, obviously, you know, Atlanta is Alalantwi, you understand, which is what Atlantis is in Misbatia. The Twi is jewel, as you heard a little bit earlier with Thahutwi. And so that's what we're calling today North and South America. Yes, and that is Alalantwi. Yeah, Atlan, from the word Utla, you understand, means a place to go on vacation. Understood? And so we used to fly, walk, sail over to the Americas, you understand, to go on holiday. So as we talked about last week, that's why you have an Egypt to the east. We also have Egypt to the west, which is what our Tamaray was known of in Atlanta or Georgia. And so, well, it wasn't in Atlanta, but in Georgia, we see Atlanta, Georgia, which ties into Atlantis. No one makes the correlation between the two, even though phonetically they're almost directly the same. And so it's just that the Greeks always put an IS on everything. Isis, you know, Osiris, yeah. You catch the drift. So Nabta Playa is in fact an older calendar that calculates the movement of the planet in correlation to the Orion star constellation, older than even 24,000 years, in relation back to the brother's question. So we had calendars older than 24 years still mapping out that cycle, understood, in that regard. So Nabta Playa, don't know if we're going to get, we're certainly not going to get time to do that today. We may touch upon it in part 5 in that regard. So let's look at here. We'll go from, Go from 208. So it was 208. So it was the people of Hermopolis who built the Great Guardian, whichever watchers looking towards the awakening race of Afaf Reye Africans. 209. In the place of Parnatharu. 210. The day that he does not come forth, his voice will be heard. 211. The olden times when mortals lived in the ground, there came the great one whose name is known by Thui Yaanuwn. A name has no mother and father, has no beginning of days nor end of days. It is worn by a chosen being. You understand? So in that regard, remember, it's a seat or position and title as well as an individual. Do you understand? As we talked about last week, I think about president. You understand? Mr. President, former and future, former and current being called Mr. President. Yes, so it's a seat, but also having no mother and father is also symbolically expressed as being able to stand on your own 2 feet. It's like when somebody says, as a self-made millionaire, yeah, they're self-made, didn't receive it by inheritance in that regard. Yeah, they're self-made. They have no, in Masonry, talking about having no mother and father. You understand? So in that system, let's see what we can say here. So in that system, it's not, men are not connected in that way in relation by blood. Yeah. So obviously we can see throughout the ages, certain times blood relationships have caused a lot of conflict. So yes, blood is thicker than water. That is correct, which denotes to try and say that the people are closer by blood than they are by water. Understood? But in that degree, we are connected by water. You understand? Hence the word semen. Understood? For those who have the ear to hear. Now, let's hear what we're saying now. So it says no mother and father, yeah, and worn by a chosen being. So we can have different people sitting in that seat. Understood? 2:12, the creator of Par-Sabatu, and has changed with many tongues. 2:12, Sabatu, Sirius star constellation. So 2:13, son of Chaf-Reye, father named Kemet, Ham, who was the father of Kashtar, Kish, Kash, and Cush, son of the sun. 2:14, Nasat, ruler of the guardian of mysteries. 2:15, Nabab, master of the guardian of mysteries. 2:16, Nabab, master of rights. 2:17, it's the important bit, protector of the gatekeepers. XYX, YXY, the guardians of the way to the stars. 2:18, Par Muknash Tatu, the hermaphrodites. 2:19, Par Muknashu, the hermaphrodites. 2:20, whose bodies vibrate at twice the resonant frequency. 2:21, to vibrate with themselves twice and raise their body frequency. 22, and reach out to Atun Reye in the above. 2:23, such was Amun Hatap Paraban, known by most as Achach en Atun, Muknash, hermaphrodite. Understand? So Amun Hatap Paraban, yeah, is the fourth. Yeah, the fourth. Yeah. 2:24. And his consort known as Nafar en Atun, also known as Nafar Twi Nefertiti, of mixed Habaru Hebrew, yet Muknashtat hermaphrodite. 2:25. They together vibrate on a very high frequency and relocated to Chat Atun, horizon of Atun. You can look that up, yeah? Tel El Amana, put it up on Google Earth in your own time and see the location of that exactly. Also called Tel El Amana, on the east bank of the Nile in the middle of the land to build the gateway. 226, the site was to be a vortex to Atun, above. 227, the golden child was born of Achach en Atun and his true wife, Kia. Obviously, when we talked about this last week, his wife out of the royal bloodline, remember, it's gone out of my mind for a second. It will come back to me. But yeah, obviously his wife was the daughter of his wife who he married, Tutankhamun married, was the daughter of Ankh en Atun, or in this case, Chach en Atun, and Nafar Twi or Nefertiti. Understood? Yeah. To come back to me in a second. Just bear with me. So this was Kia. So they recorded in that sense as a consort Kia because she wasn't of royal bloodline. If you remember the story we were talking about last week, yeah. That was it. Anak Sanantat Pa Atun, yeah, or Ankh Senpatan. Yeah, the name came back to me. There you go. So Ankh Senpatan, you understand, or Patun. Yeah, or Anach Sanantat, yeah, Pa Atun there. Because, as I say, she was the daughter of Ankh en Atun and Nefertiti. Understood? She was the third daughter, if memory serves me correctly. And she got married to Tutankhamun when he was 10, because she had the royal bloodline that enabled him to ascend to the throne. Because his true wife here, but remember, she was not of royal, or considered at least of royal birth. Understood? But obviously some more stuff going on here in the background that's being alluded to. Now, 228, this was Pa Messiah Christ, the Messiah Christ, named the Hutwi Anach Amun, or Tutankhamun, living image of Amun. This name was his own mother's choice. So it's showing you who she was more aligned to. 230. Tutankhamun's hermaphrodite father, Achach en Atun, disagreed with the worship of Amun-Re for Atun-Re, to the anger of the priest of Amun. There's a tape, probably video now, of a tape called Wealth, Sex and Death. If you want to know why he was angry, seek out that tape. Wealth, Sex and Death. Yeah, Wealth, Sex and Death by Atum-Re, or Master Teacher. Yeah. So, to anger the priest of Amun. So, Achach en Atun changed his name from Tut Anach Amun to Tut Anach Atun. 231, his throne name, Nabab Chaf Reye M Reye, or Neb Chepirura, as you see in this is his throne name, the master of Chaf Rey of Reye, to the key to the gateway, the middle pyramid. First Khufu, second Chaf Rey, and third Minka Rey. 232. So we discussed this at last week's class, remember, about this switching of the end of the names, yeah, and then the positions of the sun. We just showed you an earlier slide of that, yeah, to see how those change. Yeah, it was a hidden, obviously, light of the sun when his father was in rulership. You understand? So obviously, when he then stepped to the throne, here his name changed, but there was some conflict, as you can see there in the background, to those who felt Amun-Re, you understand, was the guy, you understand, versus Atun-Re. Now, when you say Atun, when he was saying the worship of Atun, remember that Atun was himself as Anach en Atun, because he was the point person, the Para Re Aha, he was a point person. So he was that Natharu on earth. Do you understand? So when he's talking about that, he's talking about himself. Understood? Now, his particular issue, as I say, that he disagreed to do with the phallus symbols that were used by the culture of those who of Amun-Re, not just culture, but the culture of the country in that regard. Yeah. So, but Wealth, Sex and Death goes into that. Now, the gateway links to the middle star of Sahat, Orion's belt. Understood? Which, let's say, yeah, so look that up. I can't remember all the names. Mintaka, it's to know those off the top of my head. I can't think of it now. So it must be something I've eaten affecting the memory today. So, but look those up. The 3 stars, Anilam, Anitak, and Mintaka. There you go. So it's come back. So 233. The golden child would stand in the center with the Muknash Tatwi. Yeah, so the 2 hermaphrodites and Muknash Twi, so 2 hermaphrodites. That is 4. Each having Sacham, power of the inner resonant frequency. 2 times 4 equals 8, or the cube within a cube. Yeah, so see those numbers that were given in the previous, in a book prior to this one, many years before. Yeah, but later, many years before now, the more details being explained. Cube within a cube. The power to open the Bawab, Dawam, vortex, even transfer matter and cells. Understood? So the cube within a cube is a point of origin as well. You understand? Obviously, which is allowing movement between dimensional movement. You understand? It's also a point of origin. 234. This was prevented by those who did not know. 235. The hidden wisdom of neuter beings without whom you cannot open or find the gateway. Understood? So, you see, open or where's its position? You understand? Yeah, important point to note. So they've got a dual purpose, which is why I think in part 1, you understand, there was a lot of questions around the whole LGBTQ thing and all of that kind of stuff and how we felt about it. Now, what I'm saying to you is don't confuse the agenda of reducing the population of the planet, which is their stuff, and, you know, their men transforming into women and all this controversy around little Nas X and all this kind of stuff, with what is relating back to our culture, which is hermaphrodites and hermaphrodites, yes, and sexual preferences, even within all of that scope. A lot of our concern around that, or seeming concern, was programmed. Let's be honest, it was programmed from being raised in the Bible, you understand, which basically gives no direction on, let's say it doesn't give any direction. It gives direction, but there's a lot of hypocrisy in the book. You know, one time you can kill your brother and be sent to go and live in the land of Nod. You know, so murder, let's get that right. You know what I'm saying? But a man let his semen splash on the floor and God killed him instantly. Do you understand? In one place in Genesis there. So which one is it? So God did have the power in their story to kill, you understand, instantaneously. But you kill your brother and you can get away with that. You know what I'm saying? You don't get as harsh a penalty for murder, but you do the withdrawal technique. You're making love to a woman and you let your semen splash on the ground because you didn't have condoms back in these biblical times, allegedly. And basically, you get killed instantly. In fact, let me not do that to everybody. Let me find show the biblical quote here. Just bear with me 1 second. I'll come back to it. I can't find it, but but basically, the issue around that, as I say, is that there's an issue around why those beings had an issue with different types of sexual preferences being used. Their concern was nothing to do with whether woman is with woman or man was with man, etc., etc. Their concern was that basically it was going to disrupt the production of the food, which, you know, part of that food source was human beings. Understood? So as far as they was concerned, which is why, let's say, men were circumcised, because it made the tip of the phallus more sensitive, which made men ejaculate faster. Understood? So that was their concern, nothing to do with sexual preferences. Is it something that was promoted in our cultures? Well, I mean, it existed, it happened, you know what I'm saying? Is it optimum? Well, we went through a big list of all of the reasons why. So the reality of the situation is that even in nature has not determined that that's the way to procreate. So you still have to, unless you're a woman who can clone herself by way of parthenogenesis, by way of the Bartholin gland, then you produce another woman. Obviously, to produce another male, there's going to be 3 people in the equation. Do you understand? So it's a trisexual situation in that regard, and that carries more risk. You understand? For various different reasons. And so, you know, so people go into a laboratory and fertilizing their eggs by people who don't know is not the natural process. So you're going to lose the ability, I suppose, for the child to receive its soul through the natural process. So, because they don't know which sperm, when you pick out the 777,777 sperm in a healthy male's ejaculation, you don't know which one's carrying the star of life. You understand? So you can freeze seeds, you can freeze eggs or whatever, but which one is carrying, you don't know which one's carrying. You understand? If you sort of freeze it in a lab or whatever the case may be. So so the reality is it's not the most efficient, and it carries more risk. So you can see it's not optimum if the way in which people are born that way in that regard, but sometimes when they're born that way, it's as a result of a defect that's happened in the birthing process. Understood? Which is as a result of stress, which causes a chemical imbalance. Now, we've gone through that in a lot of detail in some previous classes, so go back to part 1 or 2, I think it was, we went through that in some detail. That's very different to hermaphrodites and hermaphrodites who may have, as I say, same or opposite sexual preferences, or even both, and are naturally born that way. Do you understand? So in that regard. So it is what it is. You understand? If it's not your preference, don't worry about what's taking place in somebody else's bedroom. The problem for us is maybe as a people or as a race is that basically if somebody is born with that type of configuration, in the absence of the type of high quality information and culture that understands who and what they are and what their purpose is, they could be ostracized, isn't it? Yeah, in standard society today, they could be ostracized unless you're living in, I don't know, like London, Camden, some area. You see what I mean? Things like Soho, these certain areas which are basically city-based, which are much more open, free thinking, maybe in those regards. Yeah, you're born in the wrong place. Yeah, find yourself killed, murdered. Yeah, wrong place on the planet. Not understand culture, outcast by family. Yeah. Not knowing that actually you're holding the characteristics, it's the solution for the saving of all of us. So this is the issue or the problem that we face. So, you have to understand, well, if nature kind of doesn't have an issue with it, then why have you got a problem with it? So as long as no one's asking for your number and that's not your preference, then don't need to concern yourself. That's very different, as I say, to the agenda that's going on in the media that's pushing population reduction. Understood? And one of the ways it's doing that is the promotion of LGBTQ, etc., permeating every part of society, life, programs, TV. So that's the TV influence, that's the media influence. Understood? And this is what we were talking about in part 1 in that regard. Now, so let's see here. So 234. This was prevented by those beings who did not know. 235, the hidden wisdom of the neuter beings without whom you cannot open or find the gateway. 236, it was aligned in this day and time after 6,000 year rule. 237, on the 9th of the 9th, 09, yet you were not prepared. 238, the incarnate one was in the hands of the Daweh, evil, who would act as the golden child, golden one for you, followed by emotions of your own. 239, judgments and disputes are advocates of the dead spectres of 6 evil forces. 240, false interpreter of Parnatharu. 241, misleaders, liars, and deceivers. 242, even those under the Taha earth spoke of it, the Daru, the Taru, and the Dawani. So we can see here that a particular date was given, understood. There was an opportunity for the gateway to be opened, but we wasn't in position, understood. And in terms of the master teacher's role as the hurrah of this day and time, as he's stated in the books, but not as a singular, but the one who, what makes a person a hurrah, you're carrying that sword, isn't it? The secret word, yeah, or tone, as was expressed in that story of Ray and Arashtat, or Ray and Isis, carrying that tone. So that timeline was missed, understood, because that date, or as it's been given, you understand there, symbolically, was missed. So it has to be reprogrammed and done again, you understand, if the opportunity there still exists. Okay. I think for time, yeah, we'll leave that one. So you understand the configuration of how the vortex, or this particular gateway, needed to be open, and the one that aligns with the Orion star constellation, not gateways per se, as we talk about every with the vortexes on the planet opening every 10 years on the 3 of every year. All right, okay, bear with me just 1 second. Sorry, I was speaking, but I'll mute. Let's just see here. Right, so Genesis. Can you see it on the screen? Yeah, can you see Genesis 38:4?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so Genesis 38:4 through to 10. It says, she conceived and again bore a son, and she called his name Onan, 38:5. And she conceived yet again and bore a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was at Shezib. She was when she bore him. Genesis 38:6. Then Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. 7. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. Okay, so the Lord didn't like it. So dead. 8. And Judah said to Onan, go in to your brother's wife and marry her and raise her up an heir to your brother. But Onan knew that the heir would not be his. And it came to pass when he went in to his brother's wife that he emitted on the ground, lest he should be given an heir to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord, and therefore he killed him also. You understand? So the point is that I'm saying you murder your brother, yes, you get away with it. You let your semen splash on the floor because you didn't do what the Lord told you to do, and you get killed instantly. So where is this instantaneous justice in the world today? You see what I'm saying? Where's the instantaneous justice? Is there not things that are worthy of this sort of instantaneous justice? So this is what we're relying upon. So the Lord has a certain view on different sexual acts. You understand? Because according to their Bible, David had a homosexual relationship. God didn't put him in the ground. So he had the power to, but he didn't do so. Yeah, with Jonathan in their religion. So what they say and what the book says is two different things. You understand, in that regard. Any questions before I'm finished on these last few slides? Any questions? See a hand raised. All right, Mbab, you there? All right, Mbab, you need to take yourself off mute if you're on mute.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, any questions? See a hand raised.
Yes, there is a hand raised by Divine Feminine. So, Divine Feminine, I'm going to allow you to talk. So, let me just unmute your microphone. Can you unmute your microphone, Divine Feminine? It says that you're able to speak.
I have no question.
Oh, okay. It's just that your hand is raised.
Okay.
Okay.
I unraised it.
Okay.
Contact.
There is another question by Kafir, and the question is 0909 of 09, we were not prepared. We were still not prepared. How can we prepare to be ready this time round? Isn't it the last chance we have?
It's a good question. It's a good question. If you think about it, everything up to that point was to prepare for that point. It wasn't just for that event, but everything. You understand? All the books released, all the classes, everything that was released was to prepare us for these points. So when they don't happen, I suppose you have to go a different way around. You understand? So a lot of people crying now because of some advice about the Moderna vaccine that was given, for example, and to take that instead of maybe some of the others. And people are complaining because, well, we're taking vaccines, but you've got to realize everything up to this point that we didn't do results in now having to navigate to a new path. So the first thing is you need the master teacher out, because effectively that his relationship to those golden children is critical, isn't it? To those who have developed, who have that spiritual ability, they have to be taught, understood what their role is to play in this configuration. You have to have a place where the Moknash Twi, you understand, or the hermaphrodites and hermaphrodites are comfortable to not only be who they are and express themselves, but be in the right environment where they can be taught their role in all of this. So what did we have before, which we don't have at the moment? We had a tamaray, we had a land with certain monuments that had, obviously to the public, it was, you know, monuments and sites for tourist purposes, you know, by day, so to speak. But by other times, they were spiritual sites to help us develop our spiritual faculties and abilities. So you need the land, understood, which helps us to become or express ourselves as a tribe once again in one place or multiple places of lands. And we need to have the place where we can rebuild certain monuments that are going to help people to develop these faculties, not just a case of clicking a switch and these things just come into play. They have to be developed amongst individuals to prepare. So you need the master out, you need the environment where he can teach, and you need the environment where those children of the master, or the Tahuti Muses, the Tahuti Masasis, and that's not really the correct pronunciation, but Tahuti Masasu can come together and study under, understood, and learn what needs to be learned, as well as nature changing individuals, particularly the sacred feminine, changing individuals in that form of alignment so they can be ready and taught how to open up the gateway at the appropriate time. Now, it says 999 AD, but we already explained how there's a problem with the AD calendar, understood? So it is a date, yeah, symbolic of that event taking place, understood? And so the opportunity for it to be there again, you need the master freaks. You can't communicate from prison, because if he tells you the date from there, then guess who knows about it as well? And what's happened in the past is, you know, forces even within our own tribe have tried to stop it, you understand, because of their perception of, or lack of understanding, maybe in some instances, of what was taking place. Yeah, so forces within wanted to stop that gateway from being open. So if it took place in times where we had greater knowledge of self, then you can imagine the type of challenges that are going to take place in environments where we are at now. You understand? So you need tight circles. You need those orders in place. You need people who are willing to protect certain information, protect secrets. No, not run up on Facebook and YouTube, run up their mouth because they want to sound heavy and detailed. You need people who are willing to put their lives on the line for the race. You understand? Which has happened throughout the ages. How many people did not get the glory? You know, not everybody's on Front Street. You understand? You know, a lot of people sit in the background. You don't even know the sacrifices they made. You pick up a book today, you don't know who who designed the cover, who put the words together, etc. You understand what I'm saying? So many of those people are unsung heroes in our culture today. You understand? Imagine the first person who brought the book to the area that you were in, or brought, you know, Wu-Sabat to the UK. That's an unsung hero. Now, because we aren't in our Tamarian state and we don't keep the Sajalat, we don't keep the records, so that person can get their rightful dues. You know, we take a lot of things for granted. So we have to the plan that was laid out has to be put out there again. Do you understand? We need a place, you understand, untroubled, you know what I mean, by others, so we can rebuild our city again, or cities, plural. And you need the temples or paras in place so that people can be taught under various different orders or schools. Obviously, when we get back to the elite part of it, male and females are not taught separately. Now, there may be a necessity to keep certain things separate for a time, but there's a coming together when you get to the highest of highest degrees, ancient Egyptian order. They come back together again. Let's say there's no separation in that regard. Understood? So all of that growth and evolution needs to take place under the guidance of the master. You got to think that in the set, you now understand why he spoke now, because you're living in a day and time why he spoke with so much urgency and passion behind that urgency, because of what's taking place right now. You see, not even having a land is a significant thing. I'm saying in what was being proposed. Now, arguably, in hindsight, could it have been in Africa as opposed to America? Would we have got less hassle? But you don't know the position in the Western Hemisphere in that place in Georgia was optimum. You understand? It was optimum site. So you have to think everything's kind of juggle, compromise. Okay, we don't do certain things at the right time. Then, as you rightly say, we have to, the Parnathara now have to find another way, as well as, the master teacher and the Greys who are assisting him. You understand? You understood they have to find an alternative plan, which hopefully I'll say hopefully, but the people who it's for would trust in it enough to put their energy in place to make it happen. You could fully understand now, and all those who are on this call listening to this class, you fully understand now, you don't get something done, it don't get done. There's no points for try. Yeah, there's no points for a good effort. Either you get it done or you don't. If you don't get it done, you understand, then we have to live with the consequences of that as deities. You understand? So I would say it's a last chance, because obviously if it don't get done, they're going to have to find a different way of doing things. But there's going to be, each time it doesn't get done, there's more consequences and things to overcome. You understand? Because if you miss the opportunity, then the gateways, the opportunity to open it is only at certain points in time. You understand? And so the method of those who wanted to stop it is to kill the individuals who were central to that plan, isn't it? To Amun. You understand? He only made it to the age, I think, 19. So he was killed to stop that plan from progressing. So this thing of, as well, I'm not saying you're saying that, but others thinking, it's divine. How can the master teacher be in prison? How can, if he's to say who he says he is, with 720 degree being, 76 trillion years of knowledge, how come he's in prison? You know what I mean? How come he's suffering from all these ailments? Well, as we explained last week, you can't change the physical rules of the environment. They're set as it's set when they were created by the Parnathara. They're set. You understand? So Amun, yes, he died. He got killed, and he got murdered. He's the point guy for Parnathara. Point man. You understand? At that time, he got killed. You understand? Hatat She'ep Satuk, she died of an abscess from a tooth. She's still a great person, still an amazing individual, but she obviously still subject to the rules of the environment. You understand? So all the plans that were there before of what we needed to do are the same plans going forward, but it hinges on getting the master teacher free. That's why they locked him up. That's why they kept him there. But the test is for us to be able to demonstrate, I suppose, to our higher ancestors that we can come together and overcome, this enemy. Because in the last 6,000 years, very few have been able to do that. The Mahdi story, if you know about him driving the British and the Turks out of Africa, the Maroons in Jamaica, understand? Haitian Revolution, you understand, using spirituality and spiritual powers. So, as I say, we're not here for what we've done, but rather for what we failed to do. Any other questions?
There are no further questions.
All right, let's quickly round this out then. So basically, you can see by the description in that configuration, yes, we needed this type of configuration, correct? With the golden child in the center. Understood, yeah? And you see that on the map as we showed you last week. So those 4, hermaphrodites, double the resonant frequency of the normal human being. So 4 sacred feminines standing in the corner of the star map, yes. And then you see here 2.
Sorry to interrupt. I think you may have the wrong, incorrect screen on there.
Okay, my apologies. I appreciate that. Okay, so here we see, that configuration was described in Patriarch Atlantis. Yes, we see the 4 hermaphrodites, 2 hermaphrodites and 2 hermaphrodites required, yes, with the golden child in the center, in terms of that configuration. And then to the left on the Dendora star map, we see those 4. Yes, the women upstanding, and showing that they see the Haras or Horuses there, 2 leading down. Yes, they have double the energy, isn't it, of the males there, understood, in the 4 corners. You understand? Remember, they showed that. See, they steal our stuff, isn't it? They show Atlas holding the planet up, isn't it? Yeah, the Romans show Atlas holding the planet up. So you can see here these 4 women holding up. So here is a symbolism to open up the gateway, as you can see it there in the 4-in-1 principle there. We'll talk more about that, I think, in the next part. We'll talk more about this secret temple of the Sisters of Hathor, and so, or Haratat, or Hathor, as they say. Because when you look at the Temple of Dendora, let's go back there. When you look at the Temple of Dendora, can you see here? Let's just roll in. Can you see? And the Sisters of Hathor, right the face there, right on the front. So remember, that's saying what? Hathor is saying house or dwelling place of Hara or Horus, isn't it? Yeah. So I remember, obviously, when the woman has a child, that child is in the center of the zodiac. So in that center that we saw, remember the hippopotamus, Patawarat, or Tawarat, as they say, where they get the word Torah from, the first 5 books of the Bible. So Torah's in the center, but then she's carrying a child. That child's also in the center. Think on that, isn't it? So there's a jewel there, because it's symbolic of a pregnant female. So the woman's at the center, and then the child is at the center as well. So all of these configurations, the etheric part, the physical part, they all relate to the same similar thing. But obviously, there's a step up, isn't it, in power of what's taking place, or how to open up the gateway. So how our Qadar or fate is playing itself out, understood, has already played itself out in the stars. How it's playing itself out now, understood, yes, is already playing itself out in the wrong kind of way, because we're heading towards self-destruction. It's the past that we're reconfiguring, because obviously we're changing our behavior, which alters the projected path that we're on. If we apply the things that we've been told to do, you understand? It creates a different outcome or scenario if we listen and also act upon facts. So here we can see here that it's laid out, but no one else is telling anybody this information in this detailed kind of way. I can point to a number of different organizations who are not talking about this. They're talking about some being or individual returning, yes, isn't it, to save them. That's what they're talking about. Understood? In most instances, when we look at the religious ideologies and doctrines, and we understand now, and we're going to in detail in part 4, or what we've been telling you about, is that in order to understand Lost Records of Time, you need to really get a book called Birth of Religion, Actual Facts, Birth of Religion, because it talks about, as you say, you understand about cycles. In the sky, Halley's Comet appears at a certain point in the sky, isn't it? And 70 odd years later, it disappears. correct? And then 70 years later, it comes back around and it appears again. Isn't it the same thing we've been told? We saw this individual, apparently in religion, in Christianity, 2,000 years ago. Disappears. No one can find him anywhere. You understand? And then he's supposed to be coming back around again. In 2,000 odd years later. Now, if you're looking for a man to be born, you understand, into the world, then you might miss it. You understand? If you're expecting a configuration or certain type of configuration of stars, then you know what you're looking for, isn't it? So maybe all these events could have happened, but people are looking in the wrong place. You understand? Not or looking at the right things or for the right things. Now, in their story, we know it's a bunch of bullcrap, to be fair, under analysis and scrutiny. So the issue is what we got to say on the matter, or what was our perception of things. You understand? Because this is one of our calendars right here that the world has never been taught how to read it. And there are probably many records around the world, probably several of them sitting in the British Museum, sitting in the Vatican Museums and various different places around the world, which are under lock and key by them, which tell us exactly what we need to do, because that's how we kept records. But remember, continuously this Mukasa has tried to destroy those records. That's their MO. As in Alexander the Great Killer, what did he destroy? The library in Alexandria had records for, I don't know, thousands of years, detailed records, on things where people have gone and looked things up about how long been around for and how to progress and how to manage certain situations, etc. They burnt that down, which is why, let's say, in the New York, as opposed to the old York, which is in England, but the New York, what's the female holding? She's holding a torch. Burn down the past, destroy it. You understand? Like they showed you in that movie Black Panther. I remember in Black Panther, where the adversary to Black Panther, I'm forgetting everybody's name today, but you know what I'm talking about. The guy played by I'm forgetting everybody's name today, but you know what I'm talking about. Killmonger, that's it. Killmonger destroyed all the flowers. Remember in the movie, he destroyed all the flowers. To stop them progressing their history or regime, because remember, each time the person who took on the mantle was supposed to drink the fluid or whatever, in the fact the flower who was eligible to drink it, that gave them all the power, so on and so forth. But he burned them all. So that's what they do. They burn the history. They burn our story to create his story. Do you understand? So they burn what shows about the past so they can reestablish themselves as the authority. So you create new authors who become the authority, who decide what or what is not authentic. You understand? And then make your stuff look like it's a mystery, like it didn't exist. You understand? Like it's myth, as opposed to the maths. So any questions? So if not, we'll be on the 3rd of October to do with the final part. I think that's part 5, that should say at the bottom. Final part of this, just to wrap this up as a topic and then move on to something else in that regard. So any questions?
No, there are no questions.
Okay, well, thanks for hanging on. We're going past the time a bit. Hopefully you should find those things, I say hopefully, I trust that you'll find those things relatively interesting. So research around the subject, those books there, Lost Records of Time. We've not put everything that's in the book on the table. We sort of teach around it a little bit, and to Tulli Papyrus, teach around it a little bit. So when you do read it, you can even go even further in your studies around that. So if you're able to get to a local bookstore or whatever, or support them by getting the book for your own personal studies, build your resources, you know what I mean, in your laboratory, so you can put things together in the sand. People say it's not important to read, or that's they try to separate sometimes spirituality and reading. There's no separation. You need to do all of it. You need to read, study, so you need to put certain things into practice. You need to manage your health, etc., etc. You need to deal with business. You understand? If you're hungry, you can't focus on the esoteric side. You understand? Let's keep it real. If you're stressed, it's hard to do those things either. So you need to manage the whole nine. And a great way to learn is to teach others. You understand? So Sacred Feminine, we need more Sacred Feminine teachers out there. Simply because, as I've said, expressed many times before in this class, you all are connected, or not what I've said, but what's in actual facts number 19. You're not dealing with speculation when it comes to the existence of another human being. You understand? Yeah. So you're not speculating about that. You're dealing with actual facts about that, which becomes very powerful when we're explaining certain things. You understand? So it's on you, but it'd be good to have more people teaching from that perspective. Not on women's issues. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about from that perspective, which obviously is a lot to do with women. It's not women's issues per se, but it's a lot to do with that because we're stepping back into existence. Understood? And even in this class, we touched upon Yaanuwn, but you also heard about Yaanuwn Tat. We're talking about the origin of time within a universe. Yeah, so see even there, that's a window opening another door of things that we need to explore. Okay, no problem. I've been rambling on a bit more than I should do. So join us back on the 3rd of October. Tell your friends, family, etc. Check out the YouTube channel. So should be this week, part 3 and 4. So what we've discussed today to be on that channel. So maybe check those out, and then we'll, finalize this particular subject on the 3rd of October. So everybody stay safe, take care out there, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Okay, Wadu to Sabians, everybody else, take care, bye-bye, and we'll see you soon. Wadu.